Parmenides. By Plato. Introduction and Analysis. The awe with which Plato regarded the character of the great Parmenides has extended to the dialogue which he calls by his name. None of the writings of Plato have been more copiously illustrated, both in ancient and modern times, and in none of them have the interpreters been more at variance with one another. Nor is this surprising, for the Parmenides is more fragmentary and isolated than any other dialogue, and the design of the writer is not expressly stated. The date is uncertain. The relation to the other writings of Plato is also uncertain. The connection between the two parts is at first sight extremely obscure, and in the latter of the two we are left in doubt as to whether Plato is speaking his own sentiments by the lips of Parmenides, and overthrowing him out of his own mouth, or whether he is propounding consequences which would have been admitted by Zeno and Parmenides themselves. The contradictions which follow from the hypotheses of the one and many have been regarded by some as transcendental mysteries, by others as a mere illustration, taken at random, of a new method. They seem to have been inspired by a sort of dialectical frenzy, such as may be supposed to have prevailed in the Megarian school, compare Cratylus, etc. The criticism on his own doctrine of ideas has also been considered, not as a real criticism, but as an exuberance of the metaphysical imagination which enabled Plato to go beyond himself. To the latter part of the dialogue we may certainly apply the words in which he himself describes the earlier philosophers and the sophists. They went on their way rather regardless of whether we understood them or not. The Parmenides in point of style is one of the best of the Platonic writings. The first portion of the dialogue is in no way defective in ease and grace and dramatic interest, nor in the second part, where there was no room for such qualities, is there any want of clearness or precision. The latter half is an exquisite mosaic, of which the small pieces are with the utmost fineness and regularity adapted to one another. Like the Protagoras, Phaedo, and others, the whole is a narrated dialogue, combining with the mere recital of the words spoken, the observations of the reciter on the effect produced by them. Thus we are informed by him that Zeno and Parmenides were not altogether pleased at the request of Socrates that they would examine into the nature of the one and many in the sphere of ideas, although they received his suggestion with approving smiles. And we are glad to be told that Parmenides was aged but well favored, and that Zeno was very good-looking, also that Parmenides affected to decline the great argument, on which, as Zeno knew from experience, he was not unwilling to enter. The character of Antiphon, the half-brother of Plato, who had once been inclined to philosophy, but has now shown the hereditary disposition for horses, is very naturally described. He is the sole depositary of the famous dialogue, but although he receives the strangers like a courteous gentleman, he is impatient of the trouble of reciting it. As they enter, he has been giving orders to a bridle maker. By this slight touch Plato verifies the previous description of him. After a little persuasion he is induced to favor the Clazomenians, who come from a distance, with a rehearsal. Respecting the visit of Zeno and Parmenides to Athens, we may observe, first, that such a visit is consistent with dates, and may possibly have occurred. Secondly, that Plato is very likely to have invented the meeting. You, Socrates, can easily invent Egyptian tales or anything else, Phaedrus. Thirdly, that no reliance can be placed on the circumstance as determining the date of Parmenides and Zeno. Fourthly, that the same occasion appears to be referred to by Plato in two other places. Theat, Soph. Many interpreters have regarded the Parmenides as a reductio ad absurdum of the Eleatic philosophy. But would Plato have been likely to place this in the mouth of the great Parmenides himself, who appeared to him, in Homeric language, to be venerable and awful, and to have a glorious depth of mind? Theat. It may be admitted that he has ascribed to an Eleatic stranger and the sophist opinions which went beyond the doctrines of the Eleatics. But the Eleatic stranger expressly criticizes the doctrines in which he had been brought up. He admits that he is going to lay hands on his father Parmenides. Nothing of this kind is said of Zeno and Parmenides. How then, without a word of explanation, could Plato assign to them the refutation of their own tenets? The conclusion at which we must arrive is that the Parmenides is not a refutation of the Eleatic philosophy. Nor would such an explanation afford any satisfactory connection of the first and second parts of the dialogue. and it is quite inconsistent with Plato's own relation to the Eleatics. For of all the pre-Socratic philosophers, he speaks of them with the greatest respect. But he could hardly have passed upon them a more unmeaning slight than to ascribe to their great master tenets the reverse of those which he actually held. Two preliminary remarks may be made. First, that whatever latitude we may allow to Plato in bringing together by a tour de force, as in the Phaedrus, dissimilar themes, yet he always in some way seeks to find a connection for them. Many threads join together in one the love and dialectic of the Phaedrus. We cannot conceive that the great artist would place in juxtaposition two absolutely divided and incoherent subjects. And hence we are led to make a second remark, viz., that no explanation of the Parmenides can be satisfactory which does not indicate the connection of the first and second parts. To suppose that Plato would first go out of his way to make Parmenides attack the Platonic ideas, and then proceed to a similar but more fatal assault on his own doctrine of being, appears to be the height of absurdity. Perhaps there is no passage in Plato showing greater metaphysical power than that in which he assails his own theory of ideas. The arguments are nearly, if not quite, those of Aristotle. They are the objections which naturally occur to a modern student of philosophy. Many persons will be surprised to find Plato criticizing the very conceptions which have been supposed in after ages to be peculiarly characteristic of him. How can he have placed himself so completely without them? How can he have ever persisted in them after seeing the fatal objections which might be urged against them? The consideration of this difficulty has led a recent critic, Unabridged, who in general accepts the authorized canon of the Platonic writings, to condemn the Parmenides as spurious. The accidental want of external evidence, at first sight, seems to favor this opinion. In answer, it might be sufficient to say that no ancient writing of equal length and excellence is known to be spurious. Nor is the silence of Aristotle to be hastily assumed. There is at least a doubt whether his use of the same arguments does not involve the inference that he knew the work. And if the Parmenides is spurious, like Unabridged, we are led on further than we originally intended, to pass a similar condemnation on the Theaetetus and Sophist, and therefore on the Politicus, compare Theat. Soph. But the objection is in reality fanciful, and rests on the assumption that the doctrine of the ideas was held by Plato throughout his life in the same form. For the truth is, that the Platonic ideas were in constant process of growth and transmutation, sometimes veiled in poetry and mythology, then again emerging as fixed ideas, in some passages regarded as absolute and eternal, and in others as relative to the human mind, existing in and derived from external objects as well as transcending them. The anamnesis of the ideas is chiefly insisted upon in the mythical portions of the dialogues, and really occupies a very small space in the entire works of Plato. Their transcendental existence is not asserted, and is therefore implicitly denied in the Philebus. Different forms are ascribed to them in the Republic, and they are mentioned in the Theaetetus, the Sophist, the Politicus, and the Laws, much as universals would be spoken of in modern books. Indeed, there are very faint traces of the transcendental doctrine of ideas, that is, of their existence apart from the mind, in any of Plato's writings, with the exception of the Meno, the Phaedrus, the Phaedo, and in portions of the Republic. The stereotyped form which Aristotle has given to them is not found in Plato. Compare Essay on the Platonic Ideas in the introduction to the Meno. The full discussion of this subject involves a comprehensive survey of the philosophy of Plato, which would be out of place here. But without digressing further from the immediate subject of the Parmenides, we may remark that Plato is quite serious in his objections to his own doctrines, nor does Socrates attempt to offer any answer to them. The perplexities which surround the one and many in the sphere of the ideas are also alluded to in the Philebus, and no answer is given to them. Nor have they ever been answered, nor can they be answered by any one else who separates the phenomenal from the real. To suppose that Plato, at a later period of his life, reached a point of view from which he was able to answer them, is a groundless assumption. The real progress of Plato's own mind has been partly concealed from us by the dogmatic statements of Aristotle, and also by the degeneracy of his own followers, with whom a doctrine of numbers quickly superseded ideas. As a preparation for answering some of the difficulties which have been suggested, we may begin by sketching the first portion of the dialogue. Cephalus, of Clazomenae in Ionia, the birthplace of Anaxagoras, a citizen of no mean city in the history of philosophy, who is the narrator of the dialogue, describes himself as meeting Adeimantus and Glaucon in the Agora at Athens. Welcome, Cephalus. Can we do anything for you in Athens? Why, yes, I came to ask a favor of you. First, tell me your half-brother's name, which I have forgotten. He was a mere child when I was last here. I know his father's, which is Pyrilampus. Yes, and the name of our brother is Antiphon. But why do you ask? Let me introduce to you some countrymen of mine, who are lovers of philosophy. They have heard that Antiphon remembers a conversation of Socrates with Parmenides and Zeno, of which the report came to him from Pythagoras, Zeno's friend. That is quite true. And can they hear the dialogue? Nothing easier. In the days of his youth he made a careful study of the piece. At present, his thoughts have another direction. He takes after his grandfather, and has given up philosophy for horses. We went to look for him, and found him giving instructions to a worker in brass about a bridle. When he had done with him, and had learned from his brothers the purpose of our visit, he saluted me as an old acquaintance, and we asked him to repeat the dialogue. At first, he complained of the trouble, but he soon consented. He told us that Pythagoras had described to him the appearance of Parmenides and Zeno. They had come to Athens at the great Panathenea, the former being at the time about 65 years old, aged but well-favored, Zeno, who was said to have been beloved of Parmenides in the days of his youth, about 40, and very good-looking, that they lodged with Pythagoras at the Ceramicus outside the wall, whither Socrates, then a very young man, came to see them. Zeno was reading one of his theses, which he had nearly finished, when Pythagoras entered with Parmenides and Aristoteles, who was afterwards one of the 30. When the recitation was completed, Socrates requested that the first thesis of the treatise might be read again. You mean, Zeno, said Socrates, to argue that being, if it is many, must be both like and unlike, which is a contradiction, and each division of your argument is intended to elicit a similar absurdity, which may be supposed to follow from the assumption that being is many. Such is my meaning. I see, said Socrates, turning to Parmenides, that Zeno is your second self in his writings too. You prove admirably that the all is one. He gives proofs no less convincing that the many are not. To deceive the world by saying the same thing in entirely different forms is a strain of art beyond most of us. Yes, Socrates, said Zeno, but though you are as keen as a Spartan hound, you do not quite catch the motive of the piece, which was only intended to protect Parmenides against ridicule by showing that the hypothesis of the existence of the many involved greater absurdities than the hypothesis of the one. The book was a youthful composition of mine, which was stolen from me, and therefore I had no choice about the publication. I quite believe you, said Socrates, but will you answer me a question? I should like to know whether you would assume an idea of likeness in the abstract, which is the contradictory of unlikeness in the abstract, by participation in either or both of which things are like or unlike or partly both. For the same things may very well partake of like and unlike in the concrete, though like and unlike in the abstract are irreconcilable. Nor does there appear to me to be any absurdity in maintaining that the same things may partake of the one and many, though I should be indeed surprised to hear that the absolute one is also many. For example, I, being many, that is to say, having many parts or members, am yet also one, and partake of the one, being one of 7 who are here present, compare Philebus. This is not an absurdity, but a truism. But I should be amazed if there were a similar entanglement in the nature of the ideas themselves, nor can I believe that one and many, like and unlike, rest and motion, in the abstract, are capable either of admixture or of separation. Pythagoras said that in his opinion Parmenides and Zeno were not very well pleased at the questions which were raised. Nevertheless, they looked at one another and smiled in seeming delight and admiration of Socrates. Tell me, said Parmenides, do you think that the abstract ideas of likeness, unity, and the rest exist apart from individuals which partake of them? And is this your own distinction? I think that there are such ideas. And would you make abstract ideas of the just, the beautiful, the good? Yes, he said. And of human beings like ourselves, of water, fire, and the like? I am not certain. And would you be undecided also about ideas of which the mention will, perhaps, appear laughable, of hair, mud, filth, and other things which are base and vile? No, Parmenides, visible things like these are, as I believe, only what they appear to be, though I am sometimes disposed to imagine that there is nothing without an idea. But I repress any such notion, from a fear of falling into an abyss of nonsense. You are young, Socrates, and therefore naturally regard the opinions of men. The time will come when philosophy will have a firmer hold of you, and you will not despise even the meanest things. But tell me, is your meaning that things become like by partaking of likeness, great by partaking of greatness, just and beautiful by partaking of justice and beauty, and so of other ideas? Yes, that is my meaning. And do you suppose the individual to partake of the whole, or of the part? Why not of the whole? Said Socrates. Because, said Parmenides, in that case the whole, which is one, would become many. Nay, said Socrates, the whole may be like the day, which is one and in many places. In this way the ideas may be one and also many. In the same sort of way, said Parmenides, as a sail, which is one, may be a cover to many. That is your meaning? Yes. And would you say that each man is covered by the whole sail, or by a part only? By a part. Then the ideas have parts, and the objects partake of a part of them only? That seems to follow. And would you like to say that the ideas are really divisible and yet remain one? Certainly not. Would you venture to affirm that great objects have a portion only of greatness transferred to them, or that small or equal objects are small or equal because they are only portions of smallness or equality? Impossible. But how can individuals participate in ideas, except in the ways which I have mentioned? That is not an easy question to answer. I should imagine the conception of ideas to arise as follows. You see great objects pervaded by a common form or idea of greatness, which you abstract. That is quite true. And supposing you embrace in one view the idea of greatness thus gained and the individuals which it comprises, a further idea of greatness arises, which makes both great, and this may go on to infinity. Socrates replies that the ideas may be thoughts in the mind only. In this case, the consequence would no longer follow. But must not the thought be of something which is the same in all and is the idea? And if the world partakes in the ideas, and the ideas are thoughts, must not all things think? Or can thought be without thought? I acknowledge the unmeaningness of this, says Socrates, and would rather have recourse to the explanation that the ideas are types in nature, and that other things partake of them by becoming like them. But to become like them is to be comprehended in the same idea, and the likeness of the idea and the individuals implies another idea of likeness, and another without end. Quite true. The theory, then, of participation by likeness has to be given up. You have hardly yet, Socrates, found out the real difficulty of maintaining abstract ideas. What difficulty? The greatest of all perhaps is this. An opponent will argue that the ideas are not within the range of human knowledge, and you cannot disprove the assertion without a long and laborious demonstration, which he may be unable or unwilling to follow. In the first place, either you nor anyone who maintains the existence of absolute ideas will affirm that they are subjective. That would be a contradiction. True, and therefore any relation in these ideas is a relation which concerns themselves only, and the objects which are named after them are relative to one another only, and have nothing to do with the ideas themselves. How do you mean? Said Socrates. I may illustrate my meaning in this way. One of us has a slave, and the idea of a slave in the abstract is relative to the idea of a master in the abstract. This correspondence of ideas, however, has nothing to do with the particular relation of our slave to us. Do you see my meaning? Perfectly. And absolute knowledge in the same way corresponds to absolute truth and being, and particular knowledge to particular truth and being, clearly. And there is a subjective knowledge which is of subjective truth, having many kinds, general and particular. But the ideas themselves are not subjective, and therefore are not within our ken. They are not. Then the beautiful and the good in their own nature are unknown to us? It would seem so. There is a worse consequence yet. What is that? I think we must admit that absolute knowledge is the most exact knowledge, which we must therefore attribute to God. But then see what follows. God, having this exact knowledge, can have no knowledge of human things, as we have divided the two spheres, and forbidden any passing from one to the other. The gods have knowledge and authority in their world only, as we have in ours. Yet, surely, to deprive God of knowledge is monstrous. These are some of the difficulties which are involved in the assumption of absolute ideas. The learner will find them nearly impossible to understand, and the teacher who has to impart them will require superhuman ability. There will always be a suspicion, either that they have no existence, or are beyond human knowledge. There I agree with you, said Socrates. Yet if these difficulties induce you to give up universal ideas, what becomes of the mind? And where are the reasoning and reflecting powers? Philosophy is at an end. I certainly do not see my way. I think, said Parmenides, that this arises out of your attempting to define abstractions, such as the good and the beautiful and the just, before you have had sufficient previous training. I notice your deficiency when you were talking with Aristoteles, the day before yesterday. Your enthusiasm is a wonderful gift, but I fear that unless you discipline yourself by dialectic while you are young, truth will elude your grasp. And what kind of discipline would you recommend? The training which you heard Zeno practicing. At the same time, I admire your saying to him that you did not care to consider the difficulty in reference to visible objects, but only in relation to ideas. Yes, because I think that in visible objects you may easily show any number of inconsistent consequences. Yes, and you should consider, not only the consequences which follow from a given hypothesis, but the consequences also which follow from the denial of the hypothesis. For example, what follows from the assumption of the existence of the many, and the counter-argument of what follows from the denial of the existence of the many, and similarly of likeness and unlikeness, motion, rest, generation, corruption, being and not being. And the consequences must include consequences to the things supposed and to other things, in themselves and in relation to one another, to individuals whom you select, to the many, and to the all. These must be drawn out both on the affirmative and on the negative hypothesis, that is, if you are to train yourself perfectly to the intelligence of the truth. What you are suggesting seems to be a tremendous process, and one of which I do not quite understand the nature, said Socrates. Will you give me an example? You must not impose such a task on a man of my years, said Parmenides. Then will you, Zeno? Let us rather, said Zeno, with a smile, ask Parmenides, for the undertaking is a serious one, as he truly says, nor could I urge him to make the attempt, except in a select audience of persons who will understand him. The whole party joined in the request. Here we have, first of all, an unmistakable attack made by the youthful Socrates on the paradoxes of Zeno. He perfectly understands their drift, and Zeno himself is supposed to admit this. But they appear to him, as he says in the Philebus also, to be rather truisms than paradoxes. For every one must acknowledge the obvious fact, that the body being one has many members, and that, in 1,000 ways, the like partakes of the unlike, the many of the one. The real difficulty begins with the relations of ideas in themselves, whether of the one and many, or of any other ideas, to one another and to the mind. But this was a problem which the Eleatic philosophers had never considered. Their thoughts had not gone beyond the contradictions of matter, motion, space, and the like. It was no wonder that Parmenides and Zeno should hear the novel speculations of Socrates with mixed feelings of admiration and displeasure. He was going out of the received circle of disputation into a region in which they could hardly follow him. From the crude idea of being in the abstract, he was about to proceed to universals or general notions. There is no contradiction in material things partaking of the ideas of one and many, either is there any contradiction in the ideas of one and many, like and unlike, in themselves. But the contradiction arises when we attempt to conceive ideas in their connection, or to ascertain their relation to phenomena. Still he affirms the existence of such ideas, and this is the position which is now in turn submitted to the criticisms of Parmenides. To appreciate truly the character of these criticisms, we must remember the place held by Parmenides in the history of Greek philosophy. He is the founder of idealism, and also of dialectic, or, in modern phraseology, of metaphysics and logic, theat, soph. Like Plato, he is struggling after something wider and deeper than satisfied the contemporary Pythagoreans. and Plato with a true instinct recognizes him as his spiritual father, whom he revered and honored more than all other philosophers together. He may be supposed to have thought more than he said, or was able to express, and although he could not, as a matter of fact, have criticized the ideas of Plato without an anachronism, the criticism is appropriately placed in the mouth of the founder of the ideal philosophy. There was probably a time in the life of Plato when the ethical teaching of Socrates came into conflict with the metaphysical theories of the earlier philosophers, and he sought to supplement the one by the other. The older philosophers were great and awful, and they had the charm of antiquity. Something which found a response in his own mind seemed to have been lost as well as gained in the Socratic dialectic. He felt no incongruity in the veteran Parmenides correcting the youthful Socrates. 2 points in his criticism are especially deserving of notice. First of all, Parmenides tries him by the test of consistency. Socrates is willing to assume ideas or principles of the just, the beautiful, the good, and to extend them to man, compare Phaedo. But he is reluctant to admit that there are general ideas of hair, mud, filth, etc. There is an ethical universal or idea, but is there also a universal of physics? Of the meanest things in the world as well as of the greatest? Parmenides rebukes this want of consistency in Socrates, which he attributes to his youth. As he grows older, philosophy will take a firmer hold of him, and then he will despise neither great things nor small, and he will think less of the opinions of mankind, compare Soph. Here is lightly touched one of the most familiar principles of modern philosophy, that in the meanest operations of nature, as well as in the noblest, in mud and filth, as well as in the sun and stars, great truths are contained. At the same time, we may note also the transition in the mind of Plato, to which Aristotle alludes, when, as he says, he transferred the Socratic universal of ethics to the whole of nature. The other criticism of Parmenides on Socrates attributes to him a want of practice in dialectic. He has observed this deficiency in him when talking to Aristoteles on a previous occasion. Plato seems to imply that there was something more in the dialectic of Zeno than in the mere interrogation of Socrates. Here, again, he may perhaps be describing the process which his own mind went through when he first became more intimately acquainted, whether at Megara or elsewhere, with the Eleatic and Megarian philosophers. Still, Parmenides does not deny to Socrates the credit of having gone beyond them in seeking to apply the paradoxes of Zeno to ideas, and this is the application which he himself makes of them in the latter part of the dialogue. He then proceeds to explain to him the sort of mental gymnastic which he should practice. He should consider not only what would follow from a given hypothesis, but what would follow from the denial of it, to that which is the subject of the hypothesis, and to all other things. There is no trace in the memorabilia of Xenophon of any such method being attributed to Socrates, nor is the dialectic here spoken of that favorite method of proceeding by regular divisions, which is described in the Phaedrus and Philebus, and of which examples are given in the Politicus and in the Sophist. It is expressly spoken of as the method which Socrates had heard Zeno practice in the days of his youth, compare Soph. The discussion of Socrates with Parmenides is one of the most remarkable passages in Plato. Few writers have ever been able to anticipate the criticism of the Moro on their favorite notions. But Plato may here be said to anticipate the judgment not only of the Moro, but of all after ages on the Platonic ideas. For in some points he touches questions which have not yet received their solution in modern philosophy. The first difficulty which Parmenides raises respecting the Platonic ideas relates to the manner in which individuals are connected with them. Do they participate in the ideas, or do they merely resemble them? Parmenides shows that objections may be urged against either of these modes of conceiving the connection. Things are little by partaking of littleness, great by partaking of greatness, and the like. But they cannot partake of a part of greatness, for that will not make them great, etc., nor can each object monopolize the whole. The only answer to this is, that partaking is a figure of speech, really corresponding to the processes which a later logic designates by the terms abstraction and generalization. When we have described accurately the methods or forms which the mind employs, we cannot further criticize them. At least we can only criticize them with reference to their fitness as instruments of thought to express facts. Socrates attempts to support his view of the ideas by the parallel of the day, which is one and in many places. But he is easily driven from his position by a counter-illustration of Parmenides, who compares the idea of greatness to a sail. He truly explains to Socrates that he has attained the conception of ideas by a process of generalization. At the same time, he points out a difficulty, which appears to be involved, viz., that the process of generalization will go on to infinity. Socrates meets the supposed difficulty by a flash of light, which is indeed the true answer that the ideas are in our minds only. Neither realism is the truth, nor nominalism is the truth, but conceptualism, and conceptualism or any other psychological theory falls very far short of the infinite subtlety of language and thought. But the realism of ancient philosophy will not admit of this answer, which is repelled by Parmenides with another truth or half-truth of later philosophy. Every subject or subjective must have an object. Here is the great though unconscious truth, shall we say, or error, which underlay the early Greek philosophy. Ideas must have a real existence. They are not mere forms or opinions, which may be changed arbitrarily by individuals. But the early Greek philosopher never clearly saw that true ideas were only universal facts, and that there might be error in universals as well as in particulars. Socrates makes one more attempt to defend the Platonic ideas by representing them as paradigms. This is again answered by the argumentum ad infinitum. We may remark, in passing, that the process which is thus described has no real existence. The mind, after having obtained a general idea, does not really go on to form another which includes that, and all the individuals contained under it, and another without end. The difficulty belongs in fact to the Megarian age of philosophy, and is due to their illogical logic, and to the general ignorance of the ancients respecting the part played by language in the process of thought. No such perplexity could ever trouble a modern metaphysician, any more than the fallacy of Calvus or Acervus, or of Achilles and the tortoise. These sorts of metaphysics ought to occasion no more difficulty in speculation than a perpetually recurring fraction in arithmetic. It is otherwise with the objection which follows. How are we to bridge the chasm between human truth and absolute truth, between gods and men? This is the difficulty of philosophy in all ages. How can we get beyond the circle of our own ideas? Or how, remaining within them, can we have any criterion of a truth beyond and independent of them? Parmenides draws out this difficulty with great clearness. According to him, there are not only one but two chasms: the first, between individuals and the ideas which have a common name; the second, between the ideas in us and the ideas absolute. The first of these two difficulties mankind, as we may say, a little parodying the language of the Philebus, have long agreed to treat as obsolete. The second remains a difficulty for us as well as for the Greeks of the 4th century before Christ, and is the stumbling block of Kant's critic, and of the Hamiltonian adaptation of Kant, as well as of the Platonic ideas. It has been said that you cannot criticize revelation. Then how do you know what is revelation, or that there is one at all? Is the immediate rejoinder. You know nothing of things in themselves. Then how do you know that there are things in themselves? In some respects, the difficulty pressed harder upon the Greek than upon ourselves. For conceiving of God more under the attribute of knowledge than we do, he was more under the necessity of separating the divine from the human, as two spheres which had no communication with one another. It is remarkable that Plato, speaking by the mouth of Parmenides, does not treat even this second class of difficulties as hopeless or insoluble. He says only that they cannot be explained without a long and laborious demonstration. The teacher will require superhuman ability, and the learner will be hard of understanding, but an attempt must be made to find an answer to them, for, as Socrates and Parmenides both admit, the denial of abstract ideas is the destruction of the mind. We can easily imagine that among the Greek schools of philosophy in the 4th century before Christ a panic might arise from the denial of universals, similar to that which arose in the last century from Hume's denial of our ideas of cause and effect. Men do not at first recognize that thought, like digestion, will go on much the same, notwithstanding any theories which may be entertained respecting the nature of the process. Parmenides attributes the difficulties in which Socrates is involved to a want of comprehensiveness in his mode of reasoning. He should consider every question on the negative as well as the positive hypothesis, with reference to the consequences which flow from the denial as well as from the assertion of a given statement. The argument which follows is the most singular in Plato. It appears to be an imitation, or parody, of the Zenonian dialectic, just as the speeches in the Phaedrus are an imitation of the style of Lysias, or as the derivations in the Cratylus or the fallacies of the Euthydemus are a parody of some contemporary sophist. The interlocutor is not supposed, as in most of the other Platonic dialogues, to take a living part in the argument. He is only required to say yes and no in the right places. A hint has been already given that the paradoxes of Zeno admitted of a higher application. This hint is the thread by which Plato connects the two parts of the dialogue. The paradoxes of Parmenides seem trivial to us, because the words to which they relate have become trivial. Their true nature as abstract terms is perfectly understood by us, and we are inclined to regard the treatment of them in Plato as a mere straw-splitting, or legerdemain of words. Yet there was a power in them which fascinated the Neoplatonists for centuries afterwards. Something that they found in them, or brought to them, some echo or anticipation of a great truth or error, exercised a wonderful influence over their minds. To do the Parmenides justice, we should imagine similar aporia raised on themes as sacred to us, as the notions of one or being were to an ancient Eleatic. If God is, what follows? If God is not, what follows? Or again, if God is or is not the world, or if God is or is not many, or has not parts, or is not in the world, or in time, or is not finite or infinite. Or if the world is not, or has not a beginning or end, or is not infinite, or infinitely divisible. Or again, if God is not identical with his laws, or if man is not identical with the laws of nature. We can easily see that here are many subjects for thought, and that from these and similar hypotheses questions of great interest might arise. And we also remark that the conclusions derived from either of the two alternative propositions might be equally impossible and contradictory. When we ask what is the object of these paradoxes, some have answered that they are a mere logical puzzle, while others have seen in them an Hegelian propedeutic of the doctrine of ideas. The first of these views derives support from the manner in which Parmenides speaks of a similar method being applied to all ideas. Yet it is hard to suppose that Plato would have furnished so elaborate an example, not of his own but of the Eleatic dialectic, had he intended only to give an illustration of method. The second view has been often overstated by those who, like Hegel himself, have tended to confuse ancient with modern philosophy. We need not deny that Plato, trained in the school of Cratylus and Heraclitus, may have seen that a contradiction in terms is sometimes the best expression of a truth higher than either, compare Soph. But his ideal theory is not based on antinomies. The correlation of ideas was the metaphysical difficulty of the age in which he lived, and the Megarian and Cynic philosophy was a reductio ad absurdum of their isolation. To restore them to their natural connection and to detect the negative element in them is the aim of Plato and the Sophist. But his view of their connection falls very far short of the Hegelian identity of being and not being. The being and not being of Plato never merge in each other, though he is aware that determination is only negation. After criticizing the hypotheses of others, it may appear presumptuous to add another guess to the many which have been already offered. May we say, in Platonic language, that we still seem to see vestiges of a track which has not yet been taken. It is quite possible that the obscurity of the Parmenides would not have existed to a contemporary student of philosophy, and like the similar difficulty in the Philebus, is really due to our ignorance of the mind of the age. There is an obscure Megarian influence on Plato which cannot wholly be cleared up, and is not much illustrated by the doubtful tradition of his retirement to Megara after the death of Socrates. For Megara was within a walk of Athens, Phaedr, and Plato might have learned the Megarian doctrines without settling there. We may begin by remarking that the theses of Parmenides are expressly said to follow the method of Zeno, and that the complex dilemma, though declared to be capable of universal application, is applied in this instance to Zeno's familiar question of the one and many. Here, then, is a double indication of the connection of the Parmenides with the eristic school. The old Eleatics had asserted the existence of being, which they at first regarded as finite, then as infinite, then as neither finite nor infinite, to which some of them had given what Aristotle calls a form, others had ascribed a material nature only. The tendency of their philosophy was to deny to being all predicates. The Megarians, who succeeded them, like the Cynics, affirmed that no predicate could be asserted of any subject. They also converted the idea of being into an abstraction of good, perhaps with the view of preserving a sort of neutrality or indifference between the mind and things. As if they had said, in the language of modern philosophy, being is not only neither finite nor infinite, either at rest nor in motion, but neither subjective nor objective. This is the track along which Plato is leading us. Zeno had attempted to prove the existence of the one by disproving the existence of the many, and Parmenides seems to aim at proving the existence of the subject by showing the contradictions which follow from the assertion of any predicates. Take the simplest of all notions, unity. You cannot even assert being or time of this without involving a contradiction. But is the contradiction also the final conclusion? Probably no more than of Zeno's denial of the many, or of Parmenides' assault upon the ideas, no more than of the earlier dialogues of search. To us there seems to be no residuum of this long piece of dialectics. But to the mind of Parmenides and Plato, God Petronkin mention, there still remained the idea of being or good, which could not be conceived, defined, uttered, but could not be got rid of. Neither of them would have imagined that their disputation ever touched the divine being, compare Phil. The same difficulties about unity and being are raised in the sophist, but they're only as preliminary to their final solution. If this view is correct, the real aim of the hypotheses of Parmenides is to criticize the earlier Eleatic philosophy from the point of view of Zeno or the Megarians. It is the same kind of criticism which Plato has extended to his own doctrine of ideas. Nor is there any want of poetical consistency in attributing to the father Parmenides the last review of the Eleatic doctrines. The latest phases of all philosophies were fathered upon the founder of the school. Other critics have regarded the final conclusion of the Parmenides either as skeptical or as Heraclitean. In the first case, they assume that Plato means to show the impossibility of any truth. But this is not the spirit of Plato, and could not with propriety be put into the mouth of Parmenides, who, in this very dialogue, is urging Socrates, not to doubt everything, but to discipline his mind with a view to the more precise attainment of truth. The same remark applies to the second of the two theories. Plato everywhere ridicules, perhaps unfairly, his Heraclitean contemporaries, and if he had intended to support an Heraclitean thesis, would hardly have chosen Parmenides, the condemner of the undiscerning tribe who say that things both are and are not, to be the speaker. Nor, thirdly, can we easily persuade ourselves with Zeller that by the one he means the idea, and that he is seeking to prove indirectly the unity of the idea in the multiplicity of phenomena. We may now endeavor to thread the mazes of the labyrinth which Parmenides knew so well, and trembled at the thought of them. The argument has two divisions. There is the hypothesis that I cannot refuse, said Parmenides, since, as Zeno remarks, we are alone, though I may say with Ibycus, who in his old age fell in love, I, like the old racehorse, tremble at the prospect of the course which I am to run, and which I know so well. But as I must attempt this laborious game, what shall be the subject? Suppose I take my own hypothesis of the one. By all means, said Zeno. And who will answer me? Shall I propose the youngest? He will be the most likely to say what he thinks, and his answers will give me time to breathe. I am the youngest, said Aristoteles, and at your service. Proceed with your questions. The result may be summed up as follows. 1.a. One is not many, and therefore has no parts, and therefore is not a whole, which is a sum of parts, and therefore has neither beginning, middle, nor end, and is therefore unlimited, and therefore formless, being neither round nor straight, for either round nor straight can be defined without assuming that they have parts, and therefore is not in place, whether in another which would encircle and touch the one at many points, or in itself, because that which is self-containing is also contained, and therefore not one but two. This being premised, let us consider whether one is capable either of motion or rest. For motion is either change of substance, or motion on an axis, or from one place to another. But the one is incapable of change of substance, which implies that it ceases to be itself, or of motion on an axis, because there would be parts around the axis, and any other motion involves change of place. But existence in place has been already shown to be impossible, and yet more impossible is coming into being in place, which implies partial existence in two places at once, or entire existence either within nor without the same, and how can this be? And more impossible still is the coming into being either as a whole or parts of that which is neither a whole nor parts. The one, then, is incapable of motion. But neither can the one be in anything, and therefore not in the same, whether itself or some other, and is therefore incapable of rest. Neither is one the same with itself or any other, or other than itself or any other. For if other than itself, then other than one, and therefore not one, and if the same with other, it would be other, and other than one. Neither can one while remaining one be other than other, for other, and not one, is the other than other. But if not other by virtue of being one, not by virtue of itself, and if not by virtue of itself, not itself other, and if not itself other, not other than anything. Neither will one be the same with itself. For the nature of the same is not that of the one, but a thing which becomes the same with anything does not become one. For example, that which becomes the same with the many becomes many and not one. And therefore if the one is the same with itself, the one is not one with itself, and therefore one and not one. And therefore one is either other than other, nor the same with itself. Neither will the one be like or unlike itself or other, for likeness is sameness of affections, and the one and the same are different. And one having any affection which is other than being one would be more than one. The one, then, cannot have the same affection with and therefore cannot be like itself or other, nor can the one have any other affection than its own, that is, be unlike itself or any other, for this would imply that it was more than one. The one, then, is neither like nor unlike itself or other. This being the case, either can the one be equal or unequal to itself or other. For equality implies sameness of measure, as inequality implies a greater or less number of measures. But the one, not having sameness, cannot have sameness of measure, nor a greater or less number of measures, for that would imply parts and multitude. Once more, can one be older or younger than itself or other? Or of the same age with itself or other? That would imply likeness and unlikeness, equality and inequality. Therefore one cannot be in time, because that which is in time is ever becoming older and younger than itself, for older and younger are relative terms, and he who becomes older becomes younger, and is also of the same age with itself. None of which, or any other expressions of time, whether past, future, or present, can be affirmed of one. One neither is, has been, nor will be, nor becomes, nor has, nor will become. And, as these are the only modes of being, one is not, and is not one. But to that which is not, there is no attribute or relative, either name nor word nor idea nor science nor perception nor opinion appertaining. One, then, is neither named, nor uttered, nor known, nor perceived, nor imagined. But can all this be true? I think not. 1.b. Let us, however, commence the inquiry again. We have to work out all the consequences which follow on the assumption that the one is. If one is, one partakes of being, which is not the same with one. The words being and one have different meanings. Observe the consequence. In the one of being or the being of one are two parts, being and one, which form one whole. And each of the two parts is also a whole, and involves the other, and may be further subdivided into one and being, and is therefore not one but two, and thus one is never one, and in this way the one, if it is, becomes many and infinite. Again, let us conceive of a one which by an effort of abstraction we separate from being. Will this abstract one be one or many? You say one only. Let us see. In the first place, the being of one is other than one, and one and being, if different, are so because they both partake of the nature of other, which is therefore neither one nor being, and whether we take being and other, or being and one, or one and other, in any case we have two things which separately are called either, and together both. And both are two and either of two is severally one, and if one be added to any of the pairs, the sum is 3, and 2 is an even number, 3 an odd, and 2 units exist twice, and therefore there are twice 2, and 3 units exist thrice, and therefore there are thrice 3, and taken together they give twice 3 and thrice 2. We have even numbers multiplied into even, and odd into even, and even into odd numbers. But if one is, and both odd and even numbers are implied in one, must not every number exist? And number is infinite, and therefore existence must be infinite, for all and every number partakes of being. Therefore being has the greatest number of parts, and every part, however great or however small, is equally one. But can one be in many places and yet be a whole? If not a whole, it must be divided into parts and represented by a number corresponding to the number of the parts. And if so, we were wrong in saying that being has the greatest number of parts, for being is coequal and coextensive with one, and has no more parts than one, and so the abstract one broken up into parts by being is many and infinite. But the parts are parts of a whole, and the whole is their containing limit, and the one is therefore limited as well as infinite in number, and that which is a whole has beginning, middle, and end, and a middle is equidistant from the extremes, and one is therefore of a certain figure, round or straight, or a combination of the two, and being the whole includes all the parts which are the whole, and is therefore self-contained. But then, again, the whole is not in the parts, whether all or some. Not in all, because if in all, also in one, for if wanting in any one, how in all? Not in some, because the greater would then be contained in the less. But if not in all, nor in any, nor in some, either nowhere or in other. And if nowhere, nothing, therefore in other. The one as a whole, then, is in another, but regarded as a sum of parts is in itself, and is, therefore, both in itself and in another. This being the case, the one is at once both at rest and in motion, at rest, because resting in itself, in motion, because it is ever in other. And if there is truth in what has preceded, one is the same and not the same with itself and other. For everything in relation to every other thing is either the same with it or other, or if either the same nor other, then in the relation of part to a whole or whole to a part. But one cannot be a part or whole in relation to one, nor other than one, and is therefore the same with one. Yet this sameness is again contradicted by one being in another place from itself which is in the same place. This follows from one being in itself and in another. One, therefore, is other than itself. But if anything is other than anything, will it not be other than other? And the not one is other than the one, and the one than the not one. Therefore one is other than all others. But the same and the other exclude one another, and therefore the other can never be in the same, nor can the other be in anything for ever so short a time, as for that time the other will be in the same. And the other, if never in the same, cannot be either in the one or in the not one. And one is not other than not one, either by reason of other or of itself, and therefore they are not other than one another at all. Neither can the not one partake or be part of one, for in that case it would be one, nor can the not one be number, for that also involves one. And therefore, not being other than the one or related to the one as a whole to parts or parts to a whole, not one is the same as one. Wherefore the one is the same and also not the same with the others and also with itself, and is therefore like and unlike itself and the others, and just as different from the others as they are from the one, either more nor less. But if either more nor less, equally different, and therefore the one and the others have the same relations. This may be illustrated by the case of names. When you repeat the same name twice over, you mean the same thing, and when you say that the other is other than the one, or the one other than the other, this very word other, eteron, which is attributed to both, implies sameness. One, then, as being other than others, and other as being other than one, are alike in that they have the relation of otherness, and likeness is similarity of relations. And everything as being other of everything is also like everything. Again, same and other, like and unlike, are opposites, and since in virtue of being other than the others the one is like them, in virtue of being the same it must be unlike. Again, one, as having the same relations, has no difference of relation, and is therefore not unlike, and therefore like, or, as having different relations, is different and unlike. Thus, one, as being the same and not the same with itself and others, for both these reasons and for either of them, is also like and unlike itself and the others. Again, how far can one touch itself and the others? As existing in others, it touches the others, and as existing in itself, touches only itself. But from another point of view, that which touches another must be next in order of place. One, therefore, must be next in order of place to itself, and would therefore be two, and in two places. But one cannot be two, and therefore cannot be in contact with itself. Nor again can one touch the other. Two objects are required to make one contact, 3 objects make 2 contacts, and all the objects in the world, if placed in a series, would have as many contacts as there are objects, less 1. But if 1 only exists, and not 2, there is no contact. And the others, being other than 1, have no part in 1, and therefore none in number, and therefore 2 has no existence, and therefore there is no contact. For all which reasons, 1 has and has not contact with itself and the others. Once more, is 1 equal and unequal to itself and the others? Suppose 1 and the others to be greater or less than each other or equal to one another, they will be greater or less or equal by reason of equality, or greatness or smallness inhering in them in addition to their own proper nature. Let us begin by assuming smallness to be inherent in 1. In this case the inherence is either in the whole, or in a part. If the first, smallness is either coextensive with the whole 1, or contains the whole, and if coextensive with the 1, is equal to the 1, or if containing the 1 will be greater than the 1. But smallness thus performs the function of equality or of greatness, which is impossible. Again, if the inherence be in a part, the same contradiction follows: smallness will be equal to the part or greater than the part. Therefore smallness will not inhere in anything, and except the idea of smallness there will be nothing small. Neither will greatness, for greatness will have a greater, and there will be no small in relation to which it is great. And there will be no great or small in objects, but greatness and smallness will be relative only to each other. Therefore the others cannot be greater or less than the 1. Also the 1 can neither exceed nor be exceeded by the others, and they are therefore equal to one another. And this will be true also of the 1 in relation to itself. 1 will be equal to itself as well as to the others, tala. Yet 1, being in itself, must also be about itself, containing and contained, and is therefore greater and less than itself. Further, there is nothing beside the 1 and the others, and as these must be in something, they must therefore be in one another, and as that in which a thing is greater than the thing, the inference is that they are both greater and less than one another, because containing and contained in one another. Therefore the 1 is equal to and greater and less than itself or other, having also measures or parts or numbers equal to or greater or less than itself or other. But does 1 partake of time? This must be acknowledged, if the 1 partakes of being. For to be is the participation of being in present time, to have been in past, to be about to be in future time. And as time is ever moving forward, the 1 becomes older than itself, and therefore younger than itself, and is older and also younger when in the process of becoming it arrives at the present, and it is always older and younger, for at any moment the 1 is, and therefore it becomes and is not older and younger than itself but during an equal time with itself, and is therefore contemporary with itself. And what are the relations of the 1 to the others? Is it or does it become older or younger than they? At any rate the others are more than 1, and 1, being the least of all numbers, must be prior in time to greater numbers. But on the other hand, 1 must come into being in a manner accordant with its own nature. Now 1 has parts or others, and has therefore a beginning, middle, and end, of which the beginning is first and the end last. And the parts come into existence first, last of all the whole, contemporaneously with the end, being therefore younger, while the parts or others are older than the 1. But again, the 1 comes into being in each of the parts as much as in the whole, and must be of the same age with them. Therefore 1 is at once older and younger than the parts or others, and also contemporaneous with them, for no part can be a part which is not 1. Is this true of becoming as well as being? Thus much may be affirmed, that the same things which are older or younger cannot become older or younger in a greater degree than they were at first by the addition of equal times. But on the other hand the 1, if older than others, has come into being a longer time than they have. And when equal time is added to a longer and shorter, the relative difference between them is diminished. In this way that which was older becomes younger, and that which was younger becomes older, that is to say, younger and older than at first, and they ever become and never have become, for then they would be. Thus the 1 and others always are and are becoming and not becoming younger and also older than one another. And 1, partaking of time and also partaking of becoming older and younger, admits of all time, present, past, and future, was, is, shall be, was becoming, is becoming, will become. And there is science of the 1, and opinion and name and expression, as is already implied in the fact of our inquiry. Yet once more, if one be one and many, and neither one nor many, and also participant of time, must there not be a time at which one as being one partakes of being, and a time when one as not being one is deprived of being? But these two contradictory states cannot be experienced by the one both together. There must be a time of transition. And the transition is a process of generation and destruction, into and from being and not being, the one and the others. For the generation of the one is the destruction of the others, and the generation of the others is the destruction of the one. There is also separation and aggregation, assimilation and dissimilation, increase, diminution, equalization, a passage from motion to rest, and from rest to motion in the one and many. But when do all these changes take place? When does motion become rest, or rest motion? The answer to this question will throw a light upon all the others. Nothing can be in motion and at rest at the same time, and therefore the change takes place in a moment, which is a strange expression, and seems to mean change in no time. Which is true also of all the other changes, which likewise take place in no time. 1a But if one is, what happens to the others, which in the first place are not one, yet may partake of one in a certain way? The others are other than the one because they have parts, for if they had no parts they would be simply one, and parts imply a whole to which they belong, otherwise each part would be a part of many, and being itself one of them, of itself, and if a part of all, of each one of the other parts, which is absurd. For a part, if not a part of one, must be a part of all but this one, and if so not a part of each one, and if not a part of each one, not a part of any one of many, and so not of one, and if of none, how of all? Therefore a part is neither a part of many nor of all, but of an absolute and perfect whole or one. And if the others have parts, they must partake of the whole, and must be the whole of which they are the parts. And each part, as the word each implies, is also an absolute one. And both the whole and the parts partake of one, for the whole of which the parts are parts is one, and each part is one part of the whole, and whole and parts as participating in one are other than one, and as being other than one are many and infinite, and however small a fraction you separate from them is many and not one. Yet the fact of their being parts furnishes the others with a limit towards other parts and towards the whole. They are finite and also infinite, finite through participation in the one, infinite in their own nature. And as being finite they are alike, and as being infinite they are alike, but as being both finite and also infinite, they are in the highest degree unlike. And all other opposites might without difficulty be shown to unite in them. 1.bb. Once more, leaving all this, is there not also an opposite series of consequences which is equally true of the others, and may be deduced from the existence of one? There is. One is distinct from the others, and the others from one, for one and the others are all things, and there is no third existence besides them. And the whole of one cannot be in others nor parts of it, for it is separated from others and has no parts, and therefore the others have no unity, nor plurality, nor duality, nor any other number, nor any opposition or distinction, such as likeness and unlikeness, some and other, generation and corruption, odd and even. For if they had these they would partake either of one opposite, and this would be a participation in one, or of two opposites, and this would be a participation in two. Thus if one exists, one is all things, and likewise nothing, in relation to one and to the others. 2.a. But again, assume the opposite hypothesis, that the one is not, and what is the consequence? In the first place, the proposition that one is not is clearly opposed to the proposition that not one is not. The subject of any negative proposition implies at once knowledge and difference. Thus one in the proposition, the one is not, must be something known, or the words would be unintelligible, and again this one which is not is something different from other things. Moreover, this and that, some and other, may be all attributed or related to the one which is not, and which though non-existent may and must have plurality, if the one only is non-existent and nothing else. But if all is not being there is nothing which can be spoken of. Also the one which is not differs, and is different in kind from the others, and therefore unlike them, and they being other than the one, are unlike the one, which is therefore unlike them. But one, being unlike other, must be like itself, for the unlikeness of one to itself is the destruction of the hypothesis, and one cannot be equal to the others, for that would suppose being in the one, and the others would be equal to one and like one, both which are impossible, if one does not exist. The one which is not, then, if not equal, is unequal to the others, and inequality implies great and small, and equality lies between great and small, and therefore the one which is not partakes of equality. Further, the one which is not has being, for that which is true is, and it is true that the one is not. And so the one which is not, if remitting out of the being of non-existence, would become existent. For not being implies the being of not being, and being the not being of not being, or more truly being partakes of the being of being and not of the being of not being, and not being of the being of not being and not of the not being of not being. And therefore the one which is not has being and also not being. And the union of being and not being involves change or motion. But how can not being, which is nowhere, move or change either from one place to another or in the same place? And whether it is or is not, it would cease to be one if experiencing a change of substance. The one which is not, then, is both in motion and at rest, is altered and unaltered, and becomes and is destroyed, and does not become and is not destroyed. 2.b. Once more, let us ask the question, if one is not, what happens in regard to one? The expression is not implies negation of being. Do we mean by this to say that a thing, which is not, in a certain sense is? Or do we mean absolutely to deny being of it? The latter. Then the one which is not can neither be nor become nor perish nor experience change of substance or place. Neither can rest, or motion, or greatness, or smallness, or equality, or unlikeness, or likeness either to itself or other, or attribute or relation, or now or hereafter or formerly, or knowledge or opinion or perception or name or anything else be asserted of that which is not. 2.a. Once more, if one is not, what becomes of the others? If we speak of them, they must be, and their very name implies difference, and difference implies relation, not to the one, which is not, but to one another. And they are others of each other not as units but as infinities, the least of which is also infinity, and capable of infinitesimal division. And they will have no unity or number, but only a semblance of unity and number, and the least of them will appear large and manifold in comparison with the infinitesimal fractions into which it may be divided. Further, each particle will have the appearance of being equal with the fractions. For in passing from the greater to the less it must reach an intermediate point, which is equality. Moreover, each particle, although having a limit in relation to itself and to other particles, yet it has neither beginning, middle, nor end, for there is always a beginning before the beginning, and a middle within the middle, and an end beyond the end, because the infinitesimal division is never arrested by the one. Thus all being is one at a distance, and broken up when near, and like at a distance and unlike when near, and also the particles which compose being seem to be like and unlike, in rest and motion, in generation and corruption, in contact and separation, if one is not. 2.bb. Once more, let us inquire, if the one is not, and the others of the one are, what follows? In the first place, the others will not be the one, nor the many, for in that case the one would be contained in them, either will they appear to be one or many, because they have no communion or participation in that which is not, nor semblance of that which is not. If one is not, the others neither are, nor appear to be one or many, like or unlike, in contact or separation. In short, if one is not, nothing is. The result of all which is, that whether one is or is not, one and the others, in relation to themselves and to one another, are and are not, and appear to be and appear not to be, in all manner of ways. On the first hypothesis we may remark, first, that one is an identical proposition, from which we might expect that no further consequences could be deduced. The train of consequences which follows is inferred by altering the predicate into not many. Yet, perhaps, if a strict heuristic had been present, oios einer ei kai non paren, he might have affirmed that the not many presented a different aspect of the conception from the one, and was therefore not identical with it. Such a subtlety would be very much in character with the Zenonian dialectic. Secondly, we may note that the conclusion is really involved in the premises. For one is conceived as one, in a sense which excludes all predicates. When the meaning of one has been reduced to a point, there is no use in saying that it has either parts nor magnitude. Thirdly, the conception of the same is, first of all, identified with the one, and then by a further analysis distinguished from, and even opposed to it. Fourthly, we may detect notions, which have reappeared in modern philosophy, e.g., the bare abstraction of undefined unity, answering to the Hegelian saying, or the identity of contradictions that which is older is also younger, etc., or the Kantian conception of an a priori synthetical proposition one is. 2. In the first series of propositions the word is really the copula, in the second, the verb of existence. As in the first series, the negative consequence followed from one being affirmed to be equivalent to the not many, so here the affirmative consequence is deduced from one being equivalent to the many. In the former case, nothing could be predicated of the one, but now everything, multitude, relation, place, time, transition. One is regarded in all the aspects of one, and with a reference to all the consequences which flow either from the combination or the separation of them. The notion of transition involves the singular extratemporal conception of suddenness. This idea of suddenness is based upon the contradiction which is involved in supposing that anything can be in two places at once. It is a mere fiction, and we may observe that similar antinomies have led modern philosophers to deny the reality of time and space. It is not the infinitesimal of time, but the negative of time. By the help of this invention, the conception of change, which sorely exercised the minds of early thinkers, seems to be, but is not really at all explained. The difficulty arises out of the imperfection of language, and should therefore be no longer regarded as a difficulty at all. The only way of meeting it, if it exists, is to acknowledge that this rather puzzling double conception is necessary to the expression of the phenomena of motion or change, and that this and similar double notions, instead of being anomalies, are among the higher and more potent instruments of human thought. The processes by which Parmenides obtains his remarkable results may be summed up as follows. 1. Compound or correlative ideas which involve each other, such as being and not being, one and many, are conceived sometimes in a state of composition, and sometimes of division. 2. The division or distinction is sometimes heightened into total opposition, e.g., between one and same, one and other. Or 3. The idea, which has been already divided, is regarded, like a number, as capable of further infinite subdivision. 4. The argument often proceeds a dicto secundum quid ad dictum simpliciter, and conversely. 5. The analogy of opposites is misused by him. He argues indiscriminately sometimes from what is like, sometimes from what is unlike in them. 6. The idea of being or not being is identified with existence or non-existence in place or time. 7. The same ideas are regarded sometimes as in process of transition, sometimes as alternatives or opposites. 8. There are no degrees or kinds of sameness, likeness, difference, nor any adequate conception of motion or change. 9. 1. Being, time, like space in Zeno's puzzle of Achilles and the tortoise, are regarded sometimes as continuous and sometimes as discrete. 10. In some parts of the argument the abstraction is so rarefied as to become not only fallacious, but almost unintelligible, e.g. in the contradiction which is elicited out of the relative terms older and younger. 11. The relation between two terms is regarded under contradictory aspects, as for example when the existence of the one and the non-existence of the one are equally assumed to involve the existence of the many. 12. Words are used through long chains of argument, sometimes loosely, sometimes with the precision of numbers or of geometrical figures. The argument is a very curious piece of work, unique in literature. It seems to be an exposition or rather a reductio ad absurdum of the Megarian philosophy, but we are too imperfectly acquainted with this last to speak with confidence about it. It would be safer to say that it is an indication of the skeptical, hyperlogical fancies which prevailed among the contemporaries of Socrates. It throws an indistinct light upon Aristotle, and makes us aware of the debt which the world owes to him or his school. It also bears a resemblance to some modern speculations, in which an attempt is made to narrow language in such a manner that number and figure may be made a calculus of thought. It exaggerates one side of logic and forgets the rest. It has the appearance of a mathematical process. The inventor of it delights, as mathematicians do, in eliciting or discovering an unexpected result. It also helps to guard us against some fallacies by showing the consequences which flow from them. In the Parmenides we seem to breathe the spirit of the Megarian philosophy, though we cannot compare the two in detail. But Plato also goes beyond his Megarian contemporaries. He has split their straws over again, and admitted more than they would have desired. He is indulging the analytical tendencies of his age, which can divide but not combine. And he does not stop to inquire whether the distinctions which he makes are shadowy and fallacious, but whether the argument blows he follows. 3. The negative series of propositions contains the first conception of the negation of a negation. 2 minus signs in arithmetic or algebra make a plus. 2 negatives destroy each other. This abstruse notion is the foundation of the Hegelian logic. The mind must not only admit that determination is negation, but must get through negation into affirmation. Whether this process is real, or in any way an assistance to thought, or, like some other logical forms, a mere figure of speech transferred from the sphere of mathematics, may be doubted. That Plato and the most subtle philosopher of the 19th century should have lighted upon the same notion is a singular coincidence of ancient and modern thought. 4. The one and the many or others are reduced to their strictest arithmetical meaning. That 1 is 3 or 3 1 is a proposition which has, perhaps, given rise to more controversy in the world than any other. But no one has ever meant to say that 3 and 1 are to be taken in the same sense. Whereas the one and many of the Parmenides have precisely the same meaning, there is no notion of one personality or substance having many attributes or qualities. The truth seems to be rather the opposite of that which Socrates implies. There is no contradiction in the concrete, but in the abstract, and the more abstract the idea, the more palpable will be the contradiction. For just as nothing can persuade us that the number 1 is the number 3, so either can we be persuaded that any abstract idea is identical with its opposite, although they may both inhere together in some external object, or some more comprehensive conception. Ideas, persons, things may be one in one sense and many in another, and may have various degrees of unity and plurality. But in whatever sense and in whatever degree they are one they cease to be many, and in whatever degree or sense they are many they cease to be one. 2 points remain to be considered. First, the connection between the first and second parts of the dialogue. 2 NDLY. The relation of the Parmenides to the other dialogues. In both divisions of the dialogue the principal speaker is the same, and the method pursued by him is also the same, being a criticism on received opinions, first, on the doctrine of ideas, secondly, of being. From the Platonic ideas we naturally proceed to the Eleatic one, or being, which is the foundation of them. They are the same philosophy in 2 forms, and the simpler form is the truer and deeper. For the Platonic ideas are mere numerical differences, and the moment we attempt to distinguish between them, their transcendental character is lost. Ideas of justice, temperance, and good are really distinguishable only with reference to their application in the world. If we once ask how they are related to individuals or to the ideas of the divine mind, they are again merged in the aboriginal notion of being. No one can answer the questions which Parmenides asks of Socrates. And yet these questions are asked with the express acknowledgement that the denial of ideas will be the destruction of the human mind. The true answer to the difficulty here thrown out is the establishment of a rational psychology, and this is a work which is commenced in the Sophist. Plato, in urging the difficulty of his own doctrine of ideas, is far from denying that some doctrine of ideas is necessary, and for this he is paving the way. In a similar spirit he criticizes the Eleatic doctrine of being, not intending to deny ontology, but showing that the old Eleatic notion, and the very name being, is unable to maintain itself against the subtleties of the Megarians. He did not mean to say that being or substance had no existence, but he is preparing for the development of his later view, that ideas were capable of relation. The fact that contradictory consequences follow from the existence or non-existence of one or many does not prove that they have or have not existence, but rather that some different mode of conceiving them is required. Parmenides may still have thought that being was, just as Kant would have asserted the existence of things in themselves, while denying the transcendental use of the categories. Several lesser links also connect the first and second parts of the dialogue. 1. The thesis is the same as that which Zeno has been already discussing. 2. Parmenides has intimated in the first part that the method of Zeno should, as Socrates desired, be extended to ideas. 3. The difficulty of participating in greatness, smallness, equality is urged against the ideas as well as against the one. 2. The Parmenides is not only a criticism of the Eleatic notion of being, but also of the methods of reasoning then in existence, and in this point of view, as well as in the other, may be regarded as an introduction to the sophist. Long ago, in the Euthydemus, the vulgar application of the both and neither heuristic had been subjected to a similar criticism, which there takes the form of banter and irony, here of illustration. The attack upon the ideas is resumed in the Philebus, and is followed by a return to a more rational philosophy. The perplexity of the one and many is there confined to the region of ideas, and replaced by a theory of classification. The good arranged in classes is also contrasted with the barren abstraction of the Megarians. The war is carried on against the heuristics in all the later dialogues, sometimes with a playful irony, at other times with a sort of contempt. But there is no lengthened refutation of them. The Parmenides belongs to that stage of the dialogues of Plato in which he is partially under their influence, using them as a sort of critics or diviners of the truth of his own, and of the Eleatic theories. In the Theaetetus a similar negative dialectic is employed in the attempt to define science, which after every effort remains undefined still. The same question is revived from the objective side in the Sophist. Being and not being are no longer exhibited in opposition, but are now reconciled, and the true nature of not being is discovered and made the basis of the correlation of ideas. Some links are probably missing which might have been supplied if we had trustworthy accounts of Plato's oral teaching. To sum up, the Parmenides of Plato is a critique, first, of the Platonic ideas, and secondly, of the Eleatic doctrine of being. Neither are absolutely denied. But certain difficulties and consequences are shown in the assumption of either, which prove that the Platonic as well as the Eleatic doctrine must be remodeled. The negation and contradiction which are involved in the conception of the one and many are preliminary to their final adjustment. The Platonic ideas are tested by the interrogative method of Socrates. The Eleatic one or being is tried by the severer and perhaps impossible method of hypothetical consequences, negative and affirmative. In the latter we have an example of the Zenonian or Megarian dialectic, which proceeded, not by assailing premises, but conclusions. This is worked out and improved by Plato. When primary abstractions are used in every conceivable sense, any or every conclusion may be deduced from them. The words one, other, being, like, same, whole, and their opposites, have slightly different meanings, as they are applied to objects of thought or objects of sense, to number, time, place, and to the higher ideas of the reason, and out of their different meanings this feast of contradictions has been provided. The Parmenides of Plato belongs to a stage of philosophy which has passed away. At first we read it with a purely antiquarian or historical interest, and with difficulty throw ourselves back into a state of the human mind in which unity and being occupied the attention of philosophers. We admire the precision of the language, in which, as in some curious puzzle, each word is exactly fitted into every other, and long trains of argument are carried out with a sort of geometrical accuracy. We doubt whether any abstract notion could stand the searching cross-examination of Parmenides, and may at last perhaps arrive at the conclusion that Plato has been using an imaginary method to work out an unmeaning conclusion. But the truth is, that he is carrying on a process which is not either useless or unnecessary in any age of philosophy. We fail to understand him, because we do not realize that the questions which he is discussing could have had any value or importance. We suppose them to be like the speculations of some of the schoolmen, which end in nothing. But in truth he is trying to get rid of the stumbling blocks of thought which beset his contemporaries. Seeing that the Megarians and Cynics were making knowledge impossible, he takes their catchwords and analyzes them from every conceivable point of view. He is criticizing the simplest and most general of our ideas, in which, as they are the most comprehensive, the danger of error is the most serious, for, if they remain unexamined, as in a mathematical demonstration, all that flows from them is affected, and the error pervades knowledge far and wide. In the beginning of philosophy, this correction of human ideas was even more necessary than in our own times, because they were more bound up with words, and words, when once presented to the mind, exercised a greater power over thought. There is a natural realism which says, can there be a word devoid of meaning, or an idea which is an idea of nothing? In modern times, mankind have often given too great importance to a word or idea. The philosophy of the ancients was still more in slavery to them, because they had not the experience of error, which would have placed them above the illusion. The method of the Parmenides may be compared with the process of purgation, which Bacon sought to introduce into philosophy. Plato is warning us against two sorts of idols of the den. First, his own ideas, which he himself, having created, is unable to connect in any way with the external world. Secondly, against two idols in particular, unity and being, which had grown up in the pre-Socratic philosophy, and were still standing in the way of all progress and development of thought. He does not say with Bacon, let us make truth by experiment, or from these vague and inexact notions let us turn to facts. The time has not yet arrived for a purely inductive philosophy. The instruments of thought must first be forged, that they may be used hereafter by modern inquirers. How, while mankind were disputing about universals, could they classify phenomena? How could they investigate causes, when they had not as yet learned to distinguish between a cause and an end? How could they make any progress in the sciences without first arranging them? These are the deficiencies which Plato is seeking to supply in an age when knowledge was a shadow of a name only. In the earlier dialogues, the Socratic conception of universals is illustrated by his genius. In the Phaedrus, the nature of division is explained. In the Republic, the law of contradiction and the unity of knowledge are asserted. In the later dialogues, he is constantly engaged both with the theory and practice of classification. These were the new weapons, as he terms them in the Philebus, which he was preparing for the use of some who, in after ages, would be found ready enough to disown their obligations to the great master, or rather, perhaps, would be incapable of understanding them. Numberless fallacies, as we are often truly told, have originated in a confusion of the copula and the verb of existence. Would not the distinction which Plato by the mouth of Parmenides makes between one is one and one has being have saved us from this and many similar confusions? We see again that a long period in the history of philosophy was a barren tract, not uncultivated, but unfruitful, because there was no inquiry into the relation of language and thought, and the metaphysical imagination was incapable of supplying the missing link between words and things. The famous dispute between nominalists and realists would never have been heard of, if, instead of transferring the Platonic ideas into a crude Latin phraseology, the spirit of Plato had been truly understood and appreciated. Upon the term substance, at least two celebrated theological controversies appear to hinge, which would not have existed, or at least not in their present form, if we had interrogated the word substance, as Plato has the notions of unity and being. These weeds of philosophy have struck their roots deep into the soil, and are always tending to reappear, sometimes in newfangled forms, while similar words, such as development, evolution, law, and the like, are constantly put in the place of facts, even by writers who profess to base truth entirely upon fact. In an unmetaphysical age, there is probably more metaphysics in the common sense, i.e., more a priori assumption, than in any other, because there is more complete unconsciousness that we are resting on our own ideas, while we please ourselves with the conviction that we are resting on facts. We do not consider how much metaphysics are required to place us above metaphysics, or how difficult it is to prevent the forms of expression which are ready-made for our use from outrunning actual observation and experiment. In the last century, the educated world were astonished to find that the whole fabric of their ideas was falling to pieces, because Hume amused himself by analyzing the word cause into uniform sequence. Then arose a philosophy which, equally regardless of the history of the mind, sought to save mankind from skepticism by assigning to our notions of cause and effect, substance and accident, whole and part, a necessary place in human thought. Without them we could have no experience, and therefore they were supposed to be prior to experience, to be incrusted on the eye, although in the phraseology of Kant there could be no transcendental use of them, or, in other words, they were only applicable within the range of our knowledge. But into the origin of these ideas, which he obtains partly by an analysis of the proposition, partly by development of the ego, he never inquires. They seem to him to have a necessary existence, nor does he attempt to analyze the various senses in which the word cause or substance may be employed. The philosophy of Berkeley could never have had any meaning, even to himself, if he had first analyzed from every point of view the conception of matter. This poor forgotten word, which was a very good word to describe the simplest generalization of external objects, is now superseded in the vocabulary of physical philosophers by force, which seems to be accepted without any rigid examination of its meaning, as if the general idea of force in our minds furnished an explanation of the infinite variety of forces which exist in the universe. A similar ambiguity occurs in the use of the favorite word law, which is sometimes regarded as a mere abstraction, and then elevated into a real power or entity, almost taking the place of God. Theology, again, is full of undefined terms which have distracted the human mind for ages. Mankind have reasoned from them, but not to them. They have drawn out the conclusions without proving the premises. They have asserted the premises without examining the terms. The passions of religious parties have been roused to the utmost about words of which they could have given no explanation, and which had really no distinct meaning. One sort of them, faith, grace, justification, have been the symbols of one class of disputes, as the word substance, nature, person, of another, revelation, inspiration, and the like of a third. All of them have been the subject of endless reasonings and inferences. But a spell has hung over the minds of theologians or philosophers which has prevented them from examining the words themselves. Either the effort to rise above and beyond their own first ideas was too great for them, or there might, perhaps, have seemed to be an irreverence in doing so. About the divine being himself, in whom all true theological ideas live and move, men have spoken and reasoned much, and have fancied that they instinctively know him. But they hardly suspect that under the name of God even Christians have included two characters or natures as much opposed as the good and evil principle of the Persians. To have the true use of words we must compare them with things. In using them we acknowledge that they seldom give a perfect representation of our meaning. In like manner, when we interrogate our ideas we find that we are not using them always in the sense which we supposed. And Plato, while he criticizes the inconsistency of his own doctrine of universals and draws out the endless consequences which flow from the assertion either that being is or that being is not, by no means intends to deny the existence of universals or the unity under which they are comprehended. There is nothing further from his thoughts than skepticism. But before proceeding he must examine the foundations which he and others have been laying. There is nothing true which is not from some point of view untrue, nothing absolute which is not also relative, compare Republic. And so, in modern times, because we are called upon to analyze our ideas and to come to a distinct understanding about the meaning of words, because we know that the powers of language are very unequal to the subtlety of nature or of mind, we do not therefore renounce the use of them, but we replace them in their old connection, having first tested their meaning and quality, and having corrected the error which is involved in them. Or rather always remembering to make allowance for the adulteration or alloy which they contain. We cannot call a new metaphysical world into existence any more than we can frame a new universal language. In thought as in speech, we are dependent on the past. We know that the words cause and effect are very far from representing to us the continuity, or the complexity of nature or the different modes or degrees in which phenomena are connected. Yet we accept them as the best expression which we have of the correlation of forces or objects. We see that the term law is a mere abstraction, under which laws of matter and of mind, the law of nature and the law of the land are included, and some of these uses of the word are confusing, because they introduce into one sphere of thought associations which belong to another. For example, order or sequence is apt to be confounded with external compulsion and the internal workings of the mind with their material antecedents. Yet none of them can be dispensed with. We can only be on our guard against the error or confusion which arises out of them. Thus, in the use of the word substance, we are far from supposing that there is any mysterious substratum apart from the objects which we see, and we acknowledge that the negative notion is very likely to become a positive one. Still, we retain the word as a convenient generalization, though not without a double sense, substance, and essence, derived from the twofold translation of the Greek ousia. So the human mind makes the reflection that God is not a person like ourselves, is not a cause like the material causes in nature, nor even an intelligent cause like a human agent, nor an individual, for he is universal, and that every possible conception which we can form of him is limited by the human faculties. We cannot by any effort of thought or exertion of faith be in and out of our own minds at the same instant. How can we conceive him under the forms of time and space, who is out of time and space? How get rid of such forms and see him as he is? How can we imagine his relation to the world or to ourselves? Innumerable contradictions follow from either of the two alternatives, that God is or that he is not. Yet we are far from saying that we know nothing of him, because all that we know is subject to the conditions of human thought. To the old belief in him we return, but with corrections. He is a person, but not like ourselves, a mind, but not a human mind, a cause, but not a material cause, nor yet a maker or artificer. The words which we use are imperfect expressions of his true nature, but we do not therefore lose faith in what is best and highest in ourselves and in the world. A little philosophy takes us away from God, a great deal brings us back to him. When we begin to reflect, our first thoughts respecting him and ourselves are apt to be skeptical. For we can analyze our religious as well as our other ideas. We can trace their history. We can criticize their perversion. We see that they are relative to the human mind and to one another. But when we have carried our criticism to the furthest point, they still remain a necessity of our moral nature, better known and understood by us, and less liable to be shaken, because we are more aware of their necessary imperfection. They come to us with better opinion, better confirmation, not merely as the inspirations either of ourselves or of another, but deeply rooted in history and in the human mind. Parmenides. Persons of the dialogue: Cephalus, Adeimantus, Glaucon, Antiphon, Pythagoras, Socrates, Zeno, Parmenides, Aristoteles. Cephalus rehearses a dialogue which is supposed to have been narrated in his presence by Antiphon, the half-brother of Adeimantus and Glaucon, to certain Clazomenians. We had come from our home at Clazomene to Athens, and met Adeimantus and Glaucon in the agora. "Welcome, Cephalus," said Adeimantus, taking me by the hand. "Is there anything which we can do for you in Athens?" "Yes, that is why I am here. I wish to ask a favor of you." "What may that be?" he said. "I want you to tell me the name of your half-brother, which I have forgotten. He was a mere child when I last came hither from Clazomene, but that was a long time ago. His father's name, if I remember rightly, was Pyrilampus?" "Yes," he said, "and the name of our brother, Antiphon. But why do you ask?" "Let me introduce some countrymen of mine," I said. "They are lovers of philosophy, and have heard that Antiphon was intimate with a certain Pythagoras, a friend of Zeno, and remembers a conversation which took place between Socrates, Zeno, and Parmenides many years ago, Pythagoras having often recited it to him." "Quite true. And could we hear it?" I asked. "Nothing easier," he replied. "When he was a youth he made a careful study of the piece. At present his thoughts run in another direction. Like his grandfather Antiphon, he is devoted to horses. But if that is what you want, let us go and look for him. He dwells at Melita, which is quite near, and he has only just left us to go home." Accordingly we went to look for him. He was at home, and in the act of giving a bridle to a smith to be fitted. When he had done with the smith, his brothers told him the purpose of our visit, and he saluted me as an acquaintance whom he remembered from my former visit, and we asked him to repeat the dialogue. At first he was not very willing, and complained of the trouble, but at length he consented. He told us that Pythagoras had described to him the appearance of Parmenides and Zeno. They came to Athens, as he said, at the great Panathenea. The former was, at the time of his visit, about 65 years old, very white with age, but well favored. Zeno was nearly 40 years of age, tall and fair to look upon. In the days of his youth he was reported to have been beloved by Parmenides. He said that they lodged with Pythagoras in the Ceramicus, outside the wall, whither Socrates, then a very young man, came to see them, and many others with him. They wanted to hear the writings of Zeno, which had been brought to Athens for the first time on the occasion of their visit. These Zeno himself read to them in the absence of Parmenides, and had very nearly finished when Pythagoras entered, and with him Parmenides and Aristoteles, who was afterwards one of the 30, and heard the little that remained of the dialogue. Pythagoras had heard Zeno repeat them before. When the recitation was completed, Socrates requested that the first thesis of the first argument might be read over again, and this having been done, he said, "What is your meaning, Zeno? Do you maintain that if being is many, it must be both like and unlike, and that this is impossible, for either can the like be unlike, nor the unlike like? Is that your position?" "Just so," said Zeno. "And if the unlike cannot be like, or the like unlike, then according to you, being could not be many, for this would involve an impossibility. In all that you say, have you any other purpose except to disprove the being of the many? And is not each division of your treatise intended to furnish a separate proof of this, there being in all as many proofs of the not being of the many as you have composed arguments? Is that your meaning, or have I misunderstood you?" "No," said Zeno, "you have correctly understood my general purpose." "I see, Parmenides," said Socrates, "that Zeno would like to be not only one with you in friendship but your second self in his writings too. He puts what you say in another way, and would fain make believe that he is telling us something which is new. For you, in your poems, say the all is one, and of this you adduce excellent proofs, and he on the other hand says there is no many, and on behalf of this he offers overwhelming evidence. You affirm unity, he denies plurality. And so you deceive the world into believing that you are saying different things when really you are saying much the same. This is a strain of art beyond the reach of most of us." "Yes, Socrates," said Zeno. "But although you are as keen as a Spartan hound in pursuing the track, you do not fully apprehend the true motive of the composition, which is not really such an artificial work as you imagine, for what you speak of was an accident. There was no pretense of a great purpose, nor any serious intention of deceiving the world. The truth is, that these writings of mine were meant to protect the arguments of Parmenides against those who make fun of him and seek to show the many ridiculous and contradictory results which they suppose to follow from the affirmation of the one. My answer is addressed to the partisans of the many, whose attack I return with interest by retorting upon them that their hypothesis of the being of many, if carried out, appears to be still more ridiculous than the hypothesis of the being of one. Zeal for my master led me to write the book in the days of my youth, but someone stole the copy, and therefore I had no choice whether it should be published or not. The motive, however, of writing, was not the ambition of an elder man, but the pugnacity of a young one. This you do not seem to see, Socrates, though in other respects, as I was saying, your notion is a very just one." "I understand," said Socrates, "and quite accept your account. But tell me, Zeno, do you not further think that there is an idea of likeness in itself, and another idea of unlikeness, which is the opposite of likeness, and that in these two, you and I and all other things to which we apply the term many, participate, things which participate in likeness become in that degree and manner like, and so far as they participate in unlikeness become in that degree unlike? Or both like and unlike in the degree in which they participate in both? And may not all things partake of both opposites, and be both like and unlike, by reason of this participation? Where is the wonder? Now if a person could prove the absolute like to become unlike, or the absolute unlike to become like, that, in my opinion, would indeed be a wonder. But there is nothing extraordinary, Zeno, in showing that the things which only partake of likeness and unlikeness experience both. Nor, again, if a person were to show that all is one by partaking of one, and at the same time many by partaking of many, would that be very astonishing. But if he were to show me that the absolute one was many, or the absolute many one, I should be truly amazed. And so of all the rest, I should be surprised to hear that the natures or ideas themselves had these opposite qualities. But not if a person wanted to prove of me that I was many and also one. When he wanted to show that I was many, he would say that I have a right and a left side, and a front and a back, and an upper and a lower half, for I cannot deny that I partake of multitude. When, on the other hand, he wants to prove that I am one, he will say that we who are here assembled are 7, and that I am one and partake of the one. In both instances he proves his case. So again, if a person shows that such things as wood, stones, and the like, being many are also one, we admit that he shows the coexistence of the one and many, but he does not show that the many are one or the one many. He is uttering not a paradox but a truism. If, however, as I just now suggested, someone were to abstract simple notions of like, unlike, one, many, rest, motion, and similar ideas, and then to show that these admit of admixture and separation in themselves, I should be very much astonished. This part of the argument appears to be treated by you, Zeno, in a very spirited manner. But, as I was saying, I should be far more amazed if any one found in the ideas themselves which are apprehended by reason, the same puzzle and entanglement which you have shown to exist in visible objects. While Socrates was speaking, Pythagoras thought that Parmenides and Zeno were not altogether pleased at the successive steps of the argument. But still they gave the closest attention, and often looked at one another, and smiled as if in admiration of him. When he had finished, Parmenides expressed their feelings in the following words. Socrates, he said, I admire the bent of your mind towards philosophy. Tell me now, was this your own distinction between ideas in themselves and the things which partake of them? And do you think that there is an idea of likeness apart from the likeness which we possess, and of the one and many, and of the other things which Zeno mentioned? I think that there are such ideas, said Socrates. Parmenides proceeded, and would you also make absolute ideas of the just, and the beautiful, and the good, and of all that class? Yes, he said, I should. And would you make an idea of man apart from us and from all other human creatures, or of fire and water? I am often undecided, Parmenides, as to whether I ought to include them or not. And would you feel equally undecided, Socrates, about things of which the mention may provoke a smile? I mean such things as hair, mud, dirt, or anything else which is vile and paltry. Would you suppose that each of these has an idea distinct from the actual objects with which we come into contact, or not? Certainly not, said Socrates. Visible things like these are such as they appear to us, and I am afraid that there would be an absurdity in assuming any idea of them, although I sometimes get disturbed, and begin to think that there is nothing without an idea. But then again, when I have taken up this position, I run away, because I am afraid that I may fall into a bottomless pit of nonsense, and perish. And so I return to the ideas of which I was just now speaking, and occupy myself with them. Yes, Socrates, said Parmenides, that is because you are still young. The time will come, if I am not mistaken, when philosophy will have a firmer grasp of you, and then you will not despise even the meanest things. At your age, you are too much disposed to regard the opinions of men. But I should like to know whether you mean that there are certain ideas of which all other things partake, and from which they derive their names, that similars, for example, become similar, because they partake of similarity, and great things become great, because they partake of greatness, and that just and beautiful things become just and beautiful, because they partake of justice and beauty? Yes, certainly, said Socrates, that is my meaning. Then each individual partakes either of the whole of the idea or else of a part of the idea? Can there be any other mode of participation? There cannot be, he said. Then do you think that the whole idea is one, and yet, being one, is in each one of the many? Why not, Parmenides? Said Socrates. Because one and the same thing will exist as a whole at the same time in many separate individuals, and will therefore be in a state of separation from itself. Nay, but the idea may be like the day, which is one and the same in many places at once, and yet continuous with itself. In this way each idea may be one and the same in all at the same time. I like your way, Socrates, of making one in many places at once. You mean to say that if I were to spread out a sail and cover a number of men, there would be one whole including many. Is not that your meaning? I think so. And would you say that the whole sail includes each man, or a part of it only, and different parts different men? The latter. Then, Socrates, the ideas themselves will be divisible, and things which participate in them will have a part of them only and not the whole idea existing in each of them? That seems to follow. Then would you like to say, Socrates, that the one idea is really divisible and yet remains one? Certainly not, he said. Suppose that you divide absolute greatness, and that of the many great things, each one is great in virtue of a portion of greatness less than absolute greatness. Is that conceivable? No. Or will each equal thing, if possessing some small portion of equality less than absolute equality, be equal to some other thing by virtue of that portion only? Impossible. Or suppose one of us to have a portion of smallness. This is but a part of the small, and therefore the absolutely small is greater. If the absolutely small be greater, that to which the part of the small is added will be smaller and not greater than before. How absurd! Then in what way, Socrates, will all things participate in the ideas, if they are unable to participate in them either as parts or wholes? Indeed, he said, you have asked a question which is not easily answered. Well, said Parmenides, and what do you say of another question? What question? I imagine that the way in which you are led to assume one idea of each kind is as follows. You see a number of great objects, and when you look at them there seems to you to be one and the same idea, or nature, in them all. Hence you conceive of greatness as one. Very true, said Socrates. And if you go on and allow your mind in like manner to embrace in one view the idea of greatness and of great things which are not the idea, and to compare them, will not another greatness arise, which will appear to be the source of all these? It would seem so. Then another idea of greatness now comes into view over and above absolute greatness, and the individuals which partake of it, and then another, over and above all these, by virtue of which they will all be great, and so each idea instead of being one will be infinitely multiplied. But may not the ideas, asked Socrates, be thoughts only, and have no proper existence except in our minds, Parmenides? For in that case each idea may still be one, and not experience this infinite multiplication. And can there be individual thoughts which are thoughts of nothing? Impossible, he said. The thought must be of something? Yes. Of something which is or which is not. Of something which is. Must it not be of a single something, which the thought recognizes as attaching to all, being a single form or nature? Yes. And will not the something which is apprehended as one and the same in all, be an idea? From that, again, there is no escape. Then, said Parmenides, if you say that everything else participates in the ideas, must you not say either that everything is made up of thoughts, and that all things think, or that they are thoughts but have no thought? The latter view, Parmenides, is no more rational than the previous one. In my opinion, the ideas are, as it were, patterns fixed in nature, and other things are like them, and resemblances of them. What is meant by the participation of other things in the ideas is really assimilation to them. But if, said he, the individual is like the idea, must not the idea also be like the individual, in so far as the individual is a resemblance of the idea? That which is like cannot be conceived of as other than the like of like. Impossible. And when two things are alike, must they not partake of the same idea? They must. And will not that of which the two partake, and which makes them alike, be the idea itself? Certainly. Then the idea cannot be like the individual, or the individual like the idea. For if they are alike, some further idea of likeness will always be coming to light, and if that be like anything else, another, and new ideas will be always arising, if the idea resembles that which partakes of it. Quite true. The theory, then, that other things participate in the ideas by resemblance, has to be given up, and some other mode of participation devised? It would seem so. Do you see, then, Socrates, how great is the difficulty of affirming the ideas to be absolute? Yes, indeed. And further, let me say that as yet you only understand a small part of the difficulty which is involved if you make of each thing a single idea, parting it off from other things. What difficulty? He said. There are many, but the greatest of all is this: if an opponent argues that these ideas, being such as we say they ought to be, must remain unknown, no one can prove to him that he is wrong, unless he who denies their existence be a man of great ability and knowledge, and is willing to follow a long and laborious demonstration. He will remain unconvinced, and still insist that they cannot be known. What do you mean, Parmenides? Said Socrates. In the first place, I think, Socrates, that you, or any one who maintains the existence of absolute essences, will admit that they cannot exist in us. No, said Socrates, for then they would be no longer absolute. True, he said, and therefore when ideas are what they are in relation to one another, their essence is determined by a relation among themselves, and has nothing to do with the resemblances, or whatever they are to be termed, which are in our sphere, and from which we receive this or that name when we partake of them. And the things which are within our sphere and have the same names with them, are likewise only relative to one another, and not to the ideas which have the same names with them, but belong to themselves and not to them. What do you mean? Said Socrates. I may illustrate my meaning in this way, said Parmenides. A master has a slave. Now there is nothing absolute in the relation between them, which is simply a relation of one man to another. But there is also an idea of mastership in the abstract, which is relative to the idea of slavery in the abstract. These natures have nothing to do with us, nor we with them. They are concerned with themselves only, and we with ourselves. Do you see my meaning? Yes, said Socrates, I quite see your meaning. And will not knowledge, I mean absolute knowledge, answer to absolute truth? Certainly. And each kind of absolute knowledge will answer to each kind of absolute being? Yes. But the knowledge which we have will answer to the truth which we have, and again, each kind of knowledge which we have will be a knowledge of each kind of being which we have. Certainly. But the ideas themselves, as you admit, we have not and cannot have? No, we cannot. And the absolute natures or kinds are known severally by the absolute idea of knowledge? Yes. And we have not got the idea of knowledge? No. Then none of the ideas are known to us, because we have no share in absolute knowledge? I suppose not. Then the nature of the beautiful in itself, and of the good in itself, and all other ideas which we suppose to exist absolutely, are unknown to us? It would seem so. I think that there is a stranger consequence still. What is it? Would you, or would you not say, that absolute knowledge, if there is such a thing, must be a far more exact knowledge than our knowledge, and the same of beauty and of the rest? Yes. And if there be such a thing as participation in absolute knowledge, no one is more likely than God to have this most exact knowledge? Certainly. But then, will God, having absolute knowledge, have a knowledge of human things? Why not? Because, Socrates, said Parmenides, we have admitted that the ideas are not valid in relation to human things, nor human things in relation to them. The relations of either are limited to their respective spheres. Yes, that has been admitted. And if God has this perfect authority, and perfect knowledge, his authority cannot rule us, nor his knowledge know us, or any human thing, just as our authority does not extend to the gods, nor our knowledge know anything which is divine, so by parity of reason they, being gods, are not our masters, either do they know the things of men. Yet, surely, said Socrates, to deprive God of knowledge is monstrous. These, Socrates, said Parmenides, are a few, and only a few of the difficulties in which we are involved if ideas really are and we determine each one of them to be an absolute unity. He who hears what may be said against them will deny the very existence of them, and even if they do exist, he will say that they must of necessity be unknown to man, and he will seem to have reason on his side, and as we were remarking just now, will be very difficult to convince. A man must be gifted with very considerable ability before he can learn that everything has a class and an absolute essence. And still more remarkable will he be who discovers all these things for himself, and having thoroughly investigated them is able to teach them to others. I agree with you, Parmenides, said Socrates, and what you say is very much to my mind. And yet, Socrates, said Parmenides, if a man, fixing his attention on these and the like difficulties, does away with ideas of things and will not admit that every individual thing has its own determinate idea which is always one and the same, he will have nothing on which his mind can rest, and so he will utterly destroy the power of reasoning, as you seem to me to have particularly noted. Very true, he said. But then, what is to become of philosophy? Whither shall we turn, if the ideas are unknown? I certainly do not see my way at present. Yes, said Parmenides, and I think that this arises, Socrates, out of your attempting to define the beautiful, the just, the good, and the ideas generally, without sufficient previous training. I notice your deficiency, when I heard you talking here with your friend Aristoteles, the day before yesterday. The impulse that carries you towards philosophy is assuredly noble and divine, but there is an art which is called by the vulgar idle talking, and which is often imagined to be useless, in that you must train and exercise yourself, now that you are young, or truth will elude your grasp. And what is the nature of this exercise, Parmenides, which you would recommend? That which you heard Zeno practicing. At the same time, I give you credit for saying to him that you did not care to examine the perplexity in reference to visible things, or to consider the question that way, but only in reference to objects of thought, and to what may be called ideas. Why, yes, he said, there appears to me to be no difficulty in showing by this method that visible things are like and unlike and may experience anything. Quite true, said Parmenides. But I think that you should go a step further, and consider not only the consequences which flow from a given hypothesis, but also the consequences which flow from denying the hypothesis, and that will be still better training for you. What do you mean? He said. I mean, for example, that in the case of this very hypothesis of Zeno's about the many, you should inquire not only what will be the consequences to the many in relation to themselves and to the one in relation to itself and the many, on the hypothesis of the being of the many, but also what will be the consequences to the one and the many in their relation to themselves and to each other, on the opposite hypothesis. Or again, if likeness is or is not, what will be the consequences in either of these cases to the subjects of the hypothesis, and to other things, in relation both to themselves and to one another, and so of unlikeness. And the same holds good of motion and rest, of generation and destruction, and even of being and not being. In a word, when you suppose anything to be or not to be, or to be in any way affected, you must look at the consequences in relation to the thing itself, and to any other things which you choose, to each of them singly, to more than one, and to all. And so of other things, you must look at them in relation to themselves and to anything else which you suppose either to be or not to be, if you would train yourself perfectly and see the real truth. That, Parmenides, is a tremendous business of which you speak, and I do not quite understand you. Will you take some hypothesis and go through the steps? Then I shall apprehend you better. That, Socrates, is a serious task to impose on a man of my years. Then will you, Zeno? Said Socrates. Zeno answered with a smile, Let us make our petition to Parmenides himself, who is quite right in saying that you are hardly aware of the extent of the task which you are imposing on him, and if there were more of us I should not ask him, for these are not subjects which any one, especially at his age, can well speak of before a large audience. Most people are not aware that this roundabout progress through all things is the only way in which the mind can attain truth and wisdom. And therefore, Parmenides, I join in the request of Socrates, that I may hear the process again which I have not heard for a long time. When Zeno had thus spoken, Pythagoras, according to Antiphon's report of him, said that he himself and Aristoteles and the whole company entreated Parmenides to give an example of the process. I cannot refuse, said Parmenides, and yet I feel rather like Ibycus, who, when in his old age, against his will, he fell in love, compared himself to an old racehorse, who was about to run in a chariot race, shaking with fear at the course he knew so well. This was his simile of himself. And I also experience a trembling when I remember through what an ocean of words I have to wade at my time of life. But I must indulge you, as Zeno says that I ought, and we are alone. Where shall I begin? And what shall be our first hypothesis, if I am to attempt this laborious pastime? Shall I begin with myself, and take my own hypothesis the one? And consider the consequences which follow on the supposition either of the being or of the not being of one? By all means, said Zeno. And who will answer me? He said. Shall I propose the youngest? He will not make difficulties and will be the most likely to say what he thinks, and his answers will give me time to breathe. I am the one whom you mean, Parmenides, said Aristoteles, for I am the youngest and at your service. Ask, and I will answer. Parmenides proceeded. 1a. If one is, he said, the one cannot be many? Impossible. Then the one cannot have parts, and cannot be a whole? Why not? Because every part is part of a whole, is it not? Yes. And what is a whole? Would not that of which no part is wanting be a whole? Certainly. Then, in either case, the one would be made up of parts, both as being a whole, and also as having parts? To be sure. And in either case, the one would be many, and not one? True. But surely, it ought to be one and not many? It ought. Then, if the one is to remain one, it will not be a whole, and will not have parts? No. But if it has no parts, it will have neither beginning, middle, nor end, for these would of course be parts of it. Right. But then, again, a beginning and an end are the limits of everything? Certainly. Then the one, having neither beginning nor end, is unlimited? Yes, unlimited. And therefore formless, for it cannot partake either of round or straight. But why? Why, because the round is that of which all the extreme points are equidistant from the center. Yes. And the straight is that of which the center intercepts the view of the extremes? True. Then the one would have parts and would be many, if it partook either of a straight or of a circular form? Assuredly. But having no parts, it will be either straight nor round? Right. And being of such a nature, it cannot be in any place, for it cannot be either in another or in itself. How so? Because if it were in another, it would be encircled by that in which it was, and would touch it at many places and with many parts. But that which is one and indivisible, and does not partake of a circular nature, cannot be touched all round in many places. Certainly not. But if, on the other hand, one were in itself, it would also be contained by nothing else but itself, that is to say, if it were really in itself, for nothing can be in anything which does not contain it. Impossible. But then, that which contains must be other than that which is contained? For the same whole cannot do and suffer both at once, and if so, one will be no longer one, but two? True. Then one cannot be anywhere, either in itself or in another? No. Further consider, whether that which is of such a nature can have either rest or motion. Why not? Why, because the one, if it were moved, would be either moved in place or changed in nature, for these are the only kinds of motion. Yes. And the one, when it changes and ceases to be itself, cannot be any longer one. It cannot. It cannot therefore experience the sort of motion which is change of nature? Clearly not. Then can the motion of the one be in place? Perhaps. But if the one moved in place, must it not either move round and round in the same place, or from one place to another? It must. And that which moves in a circle must rest upon a center, and that which goes round upon a center must have parts which are different from the center. But that which has no center and no parts cannot possibly be carried round upon a center. Impossible. But perhaps the motion of the one consists in change of place? Perhaps so, if it moves at all. And have we not already shown that it cannot be in anything? Yes. Then its coming into being in anything is still more impossible, is it not? I do not see why. Why? Because anything which comes into being in anything can neither as yet be in that other thing while still coming into being, nor be altogether out of it, if already coming into being in it. Certainly not. And therefore whatever comes into being in another must have parts, and then one part may be in, and another part out of that other. But that which has no parts can never be at one and the same time either wholly within nor wholly without anything. True. And is there not a still greater impossibility in that which has no parts, and is not a whole, coming into being anywhere, since it cannot come into being either as a part or as a whole? Clearly. Then it does not change place by revolving in the same spot, nor by going somewhere and coming into being in something, nor again, by change in itself? Very true. Then in respect of any kind of motion the one is immovable? Immovable. But neither can the one be in anything, as we affirm? Yes, we said so. Then it is never in the same? Why not? Because if it were in the same it would be in something. Certainly. And we said that it could not be in itself, and could not be in other? True. Then one is never in the same place? It would seem not. But that which is never in the same place is never quiet or at rest? Never. One then, as would seem, is either at rest nor in motion? It certainly appears so. Neither will it be the same with itself or other, nor again, other than itself or other. How is that? If other than itself it would be other than one, and would not be one. True. And if the same with other, it would be that other, and not itself, so that upon this supposition too, it would not have the nature of one, but would be other than one? It would. Then it will not be the same with other, or other than itself? It will not. Neither will it be other than other, while it remains one, for not one, but only other, can be other than other, and nothing else. True. Then not by virtue of being one will it be other? Certainly not. But if not by virtue of being one, not by virtue of itself, and if not by virtue of itself, not itself, and itself not being other at all, will not be other than anything? Right. Neither will one be the same with itself. How not? Surely the nature of the one is not the nature of the same. Why not? It is not when anything becomes the same with anything that it becomes one. What of that? Anything which becomes the same with the many, necessarily becomes many and not one. True. But if there were no difference between the one and the same, when a thing became the same, it would always become one, and when it became one, the same? Certainly. And therefore, if one be the same with itself, it is not one with itself, and will therefore be one and also not one. Surely that is impossible. And therefore the one can neither be other than other, nor the same with itself. Impossible. And thus the one can neither be the same, nor other, either in relation to itself or other? No. Neither will the one be like anything or unlike itself or other. Why not? Because likeness is sameness of affections. Yes. And sameness has been shown to be of a nature distinct from oneness? That has been shown. But if the one had any other affection than that of being one, it would be affected in such a way as to be more than one, which is impossible. True. Then the one can never be so affected as to be the same either with another or with itself? Clearly not. Then it cannot be like another, or like itself? No. Nor can it be affected so as to be other, for then it would be affected in such a way as to be more than one. It would. That which is affected otherwise than itself or another, will be unlike itself or another, for sameness of affections is likeness. True. But the one, as appears, never being affected otherwise, is never unlike itself or other? Never. Then the one will never be either like or unlike itself or other? Plainly not. Again, being of this nature, it can neither be equal nor unequal either to itself or to other. How is that? Why, because the one if equal must be of the same measures as that to which it is equal. True. And if greater or less than things which are commensurable with it, the one will have more measures than that which is less, and fewer than that which is greater? Yes. And so of things which are not commensurate with it, the one will have greater measures than that which is less and smaller than that which is greater. Certainly. But how can that which does not partake of sameness have either the same measures or have anything else the same? Impossible. And not having the same measures, the one cannot be equal either with itself or with another? It appears so. But again, whether it have fewer or more measures, it will have as many parts as it has measures, and thus again the one will be no longer one but will have as many parts as measures. Right. And if it were of one measure, it would be equal to that measure, yet it has been shown to be incapable of equality. It has. Then it will neither partake of one measure, nor of many, nor of few, nor of the same at all, nor be equal to itself or another, nor be greater or less than itself, or other? Certainly. Well, and do we suppose that one can be older, or younger than anything, or of the same age with it? Why not? Why, because that which is of the same age with itself or other, must partake of equality or likeness of time, and we said that the one did not partake either of equality or of likeness. We did say so. And we also said that it did not partake of inequality or unlikeness. Very true. How then can one, being of this nature, be either older or younger than anything, or have the same age with it? In no way. Then one cannot be older or younger, or of the same age either with itself or with another? Clearly not. Then the one, being of this nature, cannot be in time at all, for must not that which is in time be always growing older than itself? Certainly. And that which is older must always be older than something which is younger. True. Then that which becomes older than itself also becomes at the same time younger than itself, if it is to have something to become older than. What do you mean? I mean this: a thing does not need to become different from another thing which is already different. It is different, and if it's different it has become different. If it's different it will be different. But of that which is becoming different, there cannot have been, or be about to be, or yet be, a different. The only different possible is one which is becoming. That is inevitable. But surely, the elder is a difference relative to the younger, and to nothing else. True. Then that which becomes older than itself must also, at the same time, become younger than itself? Yes. But again, it is true that it cannot become for a longer or for a shorter time than itself, but it must become, and be, and have become, and be about to be, for the same time with itself? That again is inevitable. Then things which are in time, and partake of time, must in every case, I suppose, be of the same age with themselves, and must also become at once older and younger than themselves? Yes. But the one did not partake of those affections. Not at all. Then it does not partake of time, and is not in any time? So the argument shows. Well, but do not the expressions was, and has become, and was becoming, signify a participation of past time? Certainly. And do not will be, will become, will have become, signify a participation of future time? Yes. And is, or becomes, signifies a participation of present time? Certainly. And if the one is absolutely without participation in time, it never had become, or was becoming, or was at any time, or is now become, or is becoming, or is, or will become, or will have become, or will be, hereafter. Most true. But are there any modes of partaking of being other than these? There are none. Then the one cannot possibly partake of being? That is the inference. Then the one is not at all? Clearly not. Then the one does not exist in such way as to be one, for if it were and partook of being, it would already be. But if the argument is to be trusted, the one neither is nor is one? True. But that which is not admits of no attribute or relation? Of course not. Then there is no name, nor expression, nor perception, nor opinion, nor knowledge of it? Clearly not. Then it is either named, nor expressed, nor opined, nor known, nor does anything that is perceive it. So we must infer. But can all this be true about the one? I think not. 1.b. Suppose, now, that we return once more to the original hypothesis. Let us see whether, on a further review, any new aspect of the question appears. I shall be very happy to do so. We say that we have to work out together all the consequences, whatever they may be, which follow, if the one is? Yes. Then we will begin at the beginning. If one is, can one be, and not partake of being? Impossible. Then the one will have being, but its being will not be the same with the one, for if the same, it would not be the being of the one, nor would the one have participated in being, for the proposition that one is would have been identical with the proposition that one is one. But our hypothesis is not if one is one, what will follow, but if one is, am I not right? Quite right. We mean to say that being has not the same significance as one? Of course. And when we put them together shortly, and say one is, that is equivalent to saying, partakes of being? Quite true. Once more then let us ask, if one is what will follow. Does not this hypothesis necessarily imply that one is of such a nature as to have parts? How so? In this way, if being is predicated of the one, if the one is, and one of being, if being is one, and if being and one are not the same, and since the one, which we have assumed, is, must not the whole, if it is one, itself be, and have for its parts, one and being? Certainly. And is each of these parts, one and being, to be simply called a part, or must the word part be relative to the word whole? The latter. Then that which is one is both a whole and has a part? Certainly. Again, of the parts of the one, if it is, I mean being and one, does either fail to imply the other? Is the one wanting to being, or being to the one? Impossible. Thus each of the parts also has in turn both one and being, and is at the least made up of two parts, and the same principle goes on forever, and every part whatever has always these two parts, for being always involves one, and one being, so that one is always disappearing, and becoming two. Certainly. And so the one, if it is, must be infinite in multiplicity. Clearly. Let us take another direction. What direction? We say that the one partakes of being and therefore it is? Yes. And in this way the one, if it has being, has turned out to be many? True. But now let us abstract the one which, as we say, partakes of being, and try to imagine it apart from that of which, as we say, it partakes. Will this abstract one be one only or many? One, I think. Let us see, must not the being of one be other than one? For the one is not being, but, considered as one, only partook of being? Certainly. If being and the one be two different things, it is not because the one is one that it is other than being, nor because being is being that it is other than the one, but they differ from one another in virtue of otherness and difference. Certainly. So that the other is not the same, either with the one or with being? Certainly not. And therefore whether we take being in the other, or being in the one in the other, in every such case we take two things, which may be rightly called both. How so? In this way, you may speak of being? Yes. And also of one? Yes. Then now we have spoken of either of them? Yes. Well, and when I speak of being in one, I speak of them both? Certainly. And if I speak of being in the other, or of the one in the other, in any such case do I not speak of both? Yes. And must not that which is correctly called both be also two? Undoubtedly. And of two things how can either by any possibility not be one? It cannot. Then, if the individuals of the pair are together two, they must be severally one. Clearly. And if each of them is one, then by the addition of any one to any pair, the whole becomes three? Yes. And three are odd, and two are even? Of course. And if there are two there must also be twice, and if there are three there must be thrice. That is, if twice one makes two, and thrice one three? Certainly. There are two and twice, and therefore there must be twice two, and there are three, and there is thrice, and therefore there must be thrice three? Of course. If there are three and twice, there is twice three, and if there are two and thrice, there is thrice two? Undoubtedly. Here, then, we have even taken even times, and odd taken odd times, and even taken odd times, and odd taken even times. True. And if this is so, does any number remain which has no necessity to be? None whatever. Then if one is, number must also be? It must. But if there is number, there must also be many, an infinite multiplicity of being, for number is infinite in multiplicity, and partakes also of being. Am I not right? Certainly. And if all number participates in being, every part of number will also participate? Yes. Then being is distributed over the whole multitude of things, and nothing that is, however small or however great, is devoid of it. And indeed, the very supposition of this is absurd, for how can that which is, be devoid of being? In no way. And it is divided into the greatest and into the smallest, and into being of all sizes, and is broken up more than all things. The divisions of it have no limit. True. Then it has the greatest number of parts? Yes, the greatest number. Is there any of these which is a part of being, and yet no part? Impossible. But if it is at all, and so long as it is, it must be one, and cannot be none? Certainly. Then the one attaches to every single part of being, and does not fail in any part, whether great or small, or whatever may be the size of it. True. But reflect, can one, in its entirety, be in many places at the same time? No, I see the impossibility of that. And if not in its entirety, then it is divided, for it cannot be present with all the parts of being, unless divided. True. And that which has parts will be as many as the parts are? Certainly. Then we were wrong in saying just now that being was distributed into the greatest number of parts. For it is not distributed into parts more than the one, into parts equal to the one. The one is never wanting to being, or being to the one, but being two they are co-equal and co-extensive. Certainly that is true. The one itself, then, having been broken up into parts by being, is many and infinite? True. Then not only the one which has being is many, but the one itself distributed by being, must also be many? Certainly. Further, Inasmuch as the parts are parts of a whole, the one, as a whole, will be limited, for are not the parts contained by the whole? Certainly. And that which contains is a limit? Of course. Then the one, if it has being, is one and many, whole and parts, having limits and yet unlimited in number? Clearly. And because having limits, also having extremes? Certainly. And if a whole, having beginning and middle and end. For can anything be a whole without these three? And if any one of them is wanting to anything, will that any longer be a whole? No. Then the one, as appears, will have beginning, middle, and end. It will. But again, the middle will be equidistant from the extremes, or it would not be in the middle? Yes. Then the one will partake of figure, either rectilinear or round, or a union of the two. True. And if this is the case, it will be both in itself and in another too. How? Every part is in the whole, and none is outside the whole. True. And all the parts are contained by the whole? Yes. And the one is all its parts, and neither more nor less than all? No. And the one is the whole? Of course. But if all the parts are in the whole, and the one is all of them and the whole, and they are all contained by the whole, the one will be contained by the one, and thus the one will be in itself. That is true. But then, again, the whole is not in the parts, either in all the parts, nor in some one of them. For if it is in all, it must be in one. For if there were any one in which it was not, it could not be in all the parts. For the part in which it is wanting is one of all, and if the whole is not in this, how can it be in them all? It cannot. Nor can the whole be in some of the parts. For if the whole were in some of the parts, the greater would be in the less, which is impossible. Yes, impossible. But if the whole is neither in one, nor in more than one, nor in all of the parts, it must be in something else, or cease to be anywhere at all. Certainly. If it were nowhere, it would be nothing, but being a whole, and not being in itself, it must be in another. Very true. The one, then, regarded as a whole, is in another, but regarded as being all its parts, is in itself, and therefore the one must be itself in itself and also in another. Certainly. The one, then, being of this nature, is of necessity both at rest and in motion? How? The one is at rest since it is in itself, for being in one, and not passing out of this, it is in the same, which is itself. True. And that which is ever in the same, must be ever at rest? Certainly. Well, and must not that, on the contrary, which is ever in other, never be in the same, and if never in the same, never at rest, and if not at rest, in motion? True. Then the one being always itself in itself and other, must always be both at rest and in motion. Clearly. And must be the same with itself, and other than itself, and also the same with the others, and other than the others. This follows from its previous affections. How so? Everything in relation to every other thing is either the same or other, or if either the same nor other, then in the relation of a part to a whole, or of a whole to a part. Clearly. And is the one a part of itself? Certainly not. Since it is not a part in relation to itself, it cannot be related to itself as whole to part? It cannot. But is the one other than one? No. And therefore not other than itself? Certainly not. If then it be neither other, nor a whole, nor a part in relation to itself, must it not be the same with itself? Certainly. But then, again, a thing which is in another place from itself, if this itself remains in the same place with itself, must be other than itself, for it will be in another place? True. Then the one has been shown to be at once in itself and in another? Yes. Thus, then, as appears, the one will be other than itself? True. Well, then, if anything be other than anything, will it not be other than that which is other? Certainly. And will not all things that are not one be other than the one, and the one other than the not one? Of course. Then the one will be other than the others? True. But consider, are not the absolute same, and the absolute other, opposites to one another? Of course. Then will the same ever be in the other, or the other in the same? They will not. If then the other is never in the same, there is nothing in which the other is during any space of time, for during that space of time, however small, the other would be in the same. Is not that true? Yes. And since the other is never in the same, it can never be in anything that is true. Then the other will never be either in the not one, or in the one? Certainly not. Then not by reason of otherness is the one other than the not one, or the not one other than the one. No. Nor by reason of themselves will they be other than one another, if not partaking of the other. How can they be? But if they are not other, either by reason of themselves or of the other, will they not altogether escape being other than one another? They will. Again, the not one cannot partake of the one, otherwise it would not have been not one, but would have been in some way one. True. Nor can the not one be number, for having number, it would not have been not one at all. It would not. Again, is the not one part of the one, or rather, would it not in that case partake of the one? It would. If then, in every point of view, the one and the not one are distinct, then neither is the one part or whole of the not one, nor is the not one part or whole of the one? No. But we said that things which are neither parts nor wholes of one another, nor other than one another, will be the same with one another, so we said? Yes. Then shall we say that the one, being in this relation to the not one, is the same with it? Let us say so. Then it is the same with itself and the others, and also other than itself and the others. That appears to be the inference. And it will also be like and unlike itself and the others? Perhaps. Since the one was shown to be other than the others will also be other than the one. Yes. And the one is other than the others in the same degree that the others are other than it, and neither more nor less. True. And if either more nor less, then in a like degree? Yes. In virtue of the affection by which the one is other than others and others in like manner other than it, the one will be affected like the others and the others like the one. How do you mean? I may take as an illustration the case of names. You give a name to a thing? Yes. And you may say the name once or oftener? Yes. And when you say it once, you mention that of which it is the name? And when more than once, is it something else which you mention? Or must it always be the same thing of which you speak, whether you utter the name once or more than once? Of course it is the same. And is not other a name given to a thing? Certainly. Whenever, then, you use the word other, whether once or oftener, you name that of which it is the name, and to no other do you give the name? True. Then when we say that the others are other than the one, and the one other than the others, in repeating the word other we speak of that nature to which the name is applied, and of no other? Quite true. Then the one which is other than others, and the other which is other than the one, in that the word other is applied to both, will be in the same condition, and that which is in the same condition is like. Yes. Then in virtue of the affection by which the one is other than the others, everything will be like everything, for everything is other than everything. True. Again, the like is opposed to the unlike? Yes. And the other to the same? True again. And the one was also shown to be the same with the others? Yes. And to be the same with the others is the opposite of being other than the others? Certainly. And in that it was other it was shown to be like? Yes. But in that it was the same it will be unlike by virtue of the opposite affection to that which made it like, and this was the affection of otherness. Yes. The same then will make it unlike, otherwise it will not be the opposite of the other. True. Then the one will be both like and unlike the others, like in so far as it is other, and unlike in so far as it is the same. Yes, that argument may be used. And there is another argument. What? In so far as it is affected in the same way it is not affected otherwise, and not being affected otherwise is not unlike, and not being unlike is like. But in so far as it is affected by other it is otherwise, and being otherwise affected is unlike. True. Then because the one is the same with the others and other than the others, on either of these two grounds, or on both of them, it will be both like and unlike the others? Certainly. And in the same way as being other than itself and the same with itself, on either of these two grounds and on both of them, it will be like and unlike itself? Of course. Again, how far can the one touch or not touch itself and others? Consider. I am considering. The one was shown to be in itself which was a whole? True. And also in other things? Yes. In so far as it is in other things, it would touch other things, but in so far as it is in itself, it would be debarred from touching them, and would touch itself only. Clearly. Then the inference is that it would touch both? It would. But what do you say to a new point of view? Must not that which is to touch another be next to that which it is to touch, and occupy the place nearest to that in which what it touches is situated? True. Then the one, if it is to touch itself, ought to be situated next to itself, and occupy the place next to that in which itself is? It ought. And that would require that the one should be two, and be in two places at once, and this, while it is one, will never happen. No. Then the one cannot touch itself any more than it can be two. It cannot. Neither can it touch others. Why not? The reason is that whatever is to touch another must be in separation from, and next to, that which it is to touch, and no third thing can be between them. True. Two things, then, at the least are necessary to make contact possible? They are. And if to the two a third be added in due order, the number of terms will be 3, and the contacts 2? Yes. And every additional term makes one additional contact, whence it follows that the contacts are one less in number than the terms. The first 2 terms exceeded the number of contacts by 1, and the whole number of terms exceeds the whole number of contacts by 1 in like manner, and for every one which is afterwards added to the number of terms, 1 contact is added to the contacts. True. Whatever is the whole number of things, the contacts will be always 1 less. True. But if there be only 1, and not 2, there will be no contact? How can there be? And do we not say that the others being other than the one are not one, and have no part in the one? True. Then they have no number, if they have no one in them? Of course not. Then the others are either 1 nor 2, nor are they called by the name of any number? No. 1, then, alone is 1, and 2 do not exist? Clearly not. And if there are not 2, there is no contact? There is not. Then neither does the one touch the others, nor the others the one, if there is no contact? Certainly not. For all which reasons the one touches and does not touch itself and the others? True. Further, is the one equal and unequal to itself and others? How do you mean? If the one were greater or less than the others, or the others greater or less than the one, they would not be greater or less than each other in virtue of their being the one and the others. But if in addition to their being what they are they had equality, they would be equal to one another, or if the one had smallness and the others greatness, or the one had greatness and the other smallness, whichever kind had greatness would be greater, and whichever had smallness would be smaller? Certainly. Then there are 2 such ideas as greatness and smallness, for if they were not, they could not be opposed to each other, and be present in that which is. How could they? If, then, smallness is present in the one, it will be present either in the whole or in a part of the whole? Certainly. Suppose the first, it will be either co-equal and co-extensive with the whole one, or will contain the one. Clearly. If it be co-extensive with the one, it will be co-equal with the one, or if containing the one, it will be greater than the one? Of course. But can smallness be equal to anything or greater than anything, and have the functions of greatness and equality, and not its own functions? Impossible. Then smallness cannot be in the whole of one, but if at all, in a part only? Yes. And surely not in all of a part, for then the difficulty of the whole will recur. It will be equal to or greater than any part in which it is. Certainly. Then smallness will not be in anything, whether in a whole or in a part, nor will there be anything small but actual smallness. True. Neither will greatness be in the one, for if greatness be in anything, there will be something greater other and besides greatness itself, namely, that in which greatness is, and this too when the small itself is not there, which the one, if it is great, must exceed. This, however, is impossible, seeing that smallness is wholly absent. True. But absolute greatness is only greater than absolute smallness, and smallness is only smaller than absolute greatness. Very true. Then other things not greater or less than the one, if they have neither greatness nor smallness, nor have greatness or smallness any power of exceeding or being exceeded in relation to the one, but only in relation to one another, nor will the one be greater or less than them or others, if it has either greatness nor smallness? Clearly not. Then if the one is either greater nor less than the others, it cannot either exceed or be exceeded by them? Certainly not. And that which neither exceeds nor is exceeded must be on an equality, and being on an equality, must be equal. Of course. And this will be true also of the relation of the one to itself. Having neither greatness nor smallness in itself, it will either exceed nor be exceeded by itself, but will be on an equality with and equal to itself. Certainly. Then the one will be equal both to itself and the others? Clearly so. And yet the one, being itself in itself, will also surround and be without itself, and, as containing itself, will be greater than itself, and, as contained in itself, will be less, and will thus be greater and less than itself. It will. Now there cannot possibly be anything which is not included in the one and the others? Of course not. But surely, that which is must always be somewhere? Yes. But that which is in anything will be less, and that in which it is will be greater. In no other way can one thing be in another. True. And since there is nothing other or besides the one and the others, and they must be in something, must they not be in one another, the one in the others and the others in the one, if they are to be anywhere? That is clear. But inasmuch as the one is in the others will be greater than the one, because they contain the one, which will be less than the others, because it is contained in them, and inasmuch as the others are in the one on the same principle will be greater than the others, and the others less than the one. True. The one, then, will be equal to and greater and less than itself and the others? Clearly. And if it be greater and less and equal, it will be of equal and more and less measures or divisions than itself and the others, and if of measures, also of parts? Of course. And if of equal and more and less measures or divisions, it will be in number more or less than itself and the others, and likewise equal in number to itself and to the others? How is that? It will be of more measures than those things which it exceeds, and of as many parts as measures, and so with that to which it is equal, and that than which it is less. True. And being greater and less than itself, and equal to itself, it will be of equal measures with itself and of more and fewer measures than itself, and if of measures then also of parts? It will. And being of equal parts with itself, it will be numerically equal to itself, and being of more parts, more, and being of less than itself? Certainly. And the same will hold of its relation to other things. Inasmuch as it is greater than them, it will be more in number than them, and inasmuch as it is smaller, it will be less in number, and inasmuch as it is equal in size to other things, it will be equal to them in number. Certainly. Once more, then, as would appear, the one will be in number both equal to and more and less than both itself and all other things. It will. Does the one also partake of time? And is it and does it become older and younger than itself and others, and again, neither younger nor older than itself and others, by virtue of participation in time? How do you mean? If one is, being must be predicated of it. Yes. But to be, enai, is only participation of being in present time, and to have been is the participation of being at a past time, and to be about to be is the participation of being at a future time? Very true. Then the one, since it partakes of being, partakes of time? Certainly. And is not time always moving forward? Yes. Then the one is always becoming older than itself, since it moves forward in time? Certainly. And do you remember that the older becomes older than that which becomes younger? I remember. Then since the one becomes older than itself, it becomes younger at the same time? Certainly. Thus, then, the one becomes older as well as younger than itself? Yes. And it is older, is it not, when in becoming, it gets to the point of time between was and will be, which is now, for surely in going from the past to the future, it cannot skip the present? No. And when it arrives at the present it stops from becoming older, and no longer becomes, but is older, for if it went on it would never be reached by the present, for it is the nature of that which goes on, to touch both the present and the future, letting go the present and seizing the future, while in process of becoming between them. True. But that which is becoming cannot skip the present. When it reaches the present it ceases to become, and is then whatever it may happen to be becoming. Clearly. And so the one, When in becoming older it reaches the present, ceases to become, and is then older. Certainly. And it is older than that than which it was becoming older, and it was becoming older than itself. Yes. And that which is older than that which is younger? True. Then the one is younger than itself, when in becoming older it reaches the present? Certainly. But the present is always present with the one during all its being, for whenever it is always now. Certainly. Then the one always both is and becomes older and younger than itself? Truly. And is it or does it become a longer time than itself or an equal time with itself? An equal time. But if it becomes or is for an equal time with itself, it is of the same age with itself? Of course. And that which is of the same age is neither older nor younger? No. The one, then, becoming and being the same time with itself, either is nor becomes older or younger than itself? I should say not. And what are its relations to other things? Is it or does it become older or younger than they? I cannot tell you. You can at least tell me that others than the one are more than the one. Other would have been one, but the others have multitude, and are more than one? They will have multitude. And a multitude implies a number larger than one? Of course. And shall we say that the lesser or the greater is the first to come or to have come into existence? The lesser. Then the least is the first? And that is the one? Yes. Then the one of all things that have number is the first to come into being, but all other things have also number, being plural and not singular. They have. And since it came into being first, it must be supposed to have come into being prior to the others, and the others later. And the things which came into being later are younger than that which preceded them? And so the other things will be younger than the one, and the one older than other things? True. What would you say of another question? Can the one have come into being contrary to its own nature, or is that impossible? Impossible. And yet, surely, the one was shown to have parts, and if parts, then a beginning, middle, and end? Yes. And a beginning, both of the one itself and of all other things, comes into being first of all, and after the beginning, the others follow, until you reach the end? Certainly. And all these others we shall affirm to be parts of the whole and of the one, which, as soon as the end is reached, has become whole and one. Yes, that is what we shall say. But the end comes last, and the one is of such a nature as to come into being with the last. And since the one cannot come into being except in accordance with its own nature, its nature will require that it should come into being after the others, simultaneously with the end. Clearly. Then the one is younger than the others and the others older than the one. That also is clear in my judgment. Well, and must not a beginning or any other part of the one or of anything, if it be a part and not parts, being a part, be also of necessity one? Certainly. And will not the one come into being together with each part, together with the first part when that comes into being, and together with the second part, and with all the rest, and will not be wanting to any part, which is added to any other part until it has reached the last and become one whole? It will be wanting neither to the middle, nor to the first, nor to the last, nor to any of them, while the process of becoming is going on. True. Then the one is of the same age with all the others, so that if the one itself does not contradict its own nature, it will be neither prior nor posterior to the others, but simultaneous. And according to this argument, the one will be neither older nor younger than the others, nor the others than the one, but according to the previous argument, the one will be older and younger than the others and the others than the one. Certainly. After this manner, then, the one is and has become. But as to its becoming older and younger than the others, and the others than the one, and neither older nor younger, what shall we say? Shall we say as of being so also of becoming, or otherwise? I cannot answer. But I can venture to say, that even if one thing were older or younger than another, it could not become older or younger in a greater degree than it was at first, for equals added to unequals, whether to periods of time or to anything else, leave the difference between them the same as at first. Of course. Then that which is, cannot become older or younger than that which is, since the difference of age is always the same. The one is and has become older and the other younger, but they are no longer becoming so. True. And the one which is does not therefore become either older or younger than the others which are? No. But consider whether they may not become older and younger in another way. In what way? Just as the one was proven to be older than the others and the others than the one. And what of that? If the one is older than the others, has come into being a longer time than the others. Yes. But consider again, if we add equal time to a greater and a less time, will the greater differ from the less time by an equal or by a smaller portion than before? By a smaller portion. Then the difference between the age of the one and the age of the others will not be afterwards so great as at first, but if an equal time be added to both of them, they will differ less and less in age. Yes. And that which differs in age from some other less than formerly, from being older, will become younger in relation to that other than which it was older? Yes, younger. And if the one becomes younger, the others aforesaid will become older than they were before, in relation to the one. Certainly. Then that which had become younger becomes older relatively to that which previously had become and was older. It never really is older, but is always becoming, for the one is always growing on the side of youth and the other on the side of age. And in like manner the older is always in process of becoming younger than the younger, for as they are always going in opposite directions, they become in ways the opposite to one another, the younger older than the older, and the older younger than the younger. They cannot, however, have become, for if they had already become they would be and not merely become. But that is impossible, for they are always becoming both older and younger than one another. The one becomes younger than the others because it was seen to be older and prior, and the others become older than the one because they came into being later, and in the same way the others are in the same relation to the one, because they were seen to be older and prior to the one. That is clear. Inasmuch, then, one thing does not become older or younger than another, in that they always differ from each other by an equal number, the one cannot become older or younger than the others, nor the others than the one. But inasmuch as that which came into being earlier and that which came into being later must continually differ from each other by a different portion, in this point of view the others must become older and younger than the one, and the one than the others. Certainly. For all these reasons, then, the one is and becomes older and younger than itself and the others, and neither is nor becomes older or younger than itself or the others. Certainly. But since the one partakes of time, and partakes of becoming older and younger, must it not also partake of the past, the present, and the future? Of course it must. Then the one was and is and will be, and was becoming and is becoming and will become? Certainly. And there is and was and will be something which is in relation to it, and belongs to it? True. And since we have at this moment opinion and knowledge and perception of the one, there is opinion and knowledge and perception of it? Quite right. Then there is name and expression for it, and it is named and expressed, and everything of this kind which appertains to other things appertains to the one. Certainly that is true. Yet once more and for the third time, let us consider, if the one is both one and many, as we have described, and is neither one nor many, and participates in time, must it not, in as far as it is one, at times partake of being, and in as far as it is not one, at times not partake of being? Certainly. But can it partake of being when not partaking of being, or not partake of being when partaking of being? Impossible. Then the one partakes and does not partake of being at different times, for that is the only way in which it can partake and not partake of the same. True. And is there not also a time at which it assumes being and relinquishes being? For how can it have and not have the same thing unless it receives and also gives it up at some time? Impossible. And the assuming of being is what you would call becoming? I should. And the relinquishing of being you would call destruction? I should. The one then, as would appear, becomes and is destroyed by taking and giving up being. Certainly. And being one and many and in process of becoming and being destroyed, when it becomes one it ceases to be many, and when many it ceases to be one? Certainly. And as it becomes one and many, must it not inevitably experience separation and aggregation? Inevitably. And whenever it becomes like and unlike it must be assimilated and dissimilated? Yes. And when it becomes greater or less or equal it must grow or diminish or be equalized? True. And when being in motion it rests, and when being at rest it changes to motion, it can surely be in no time at all. How can it? But that a thing which is previously at rest should be afterwards in motion, or previously in motion and afterwards at rest, without experiencing change, is impossible. Impossible. And surely there cannot be a time in which a thing can be at once either in motion nor at rest? There cannot. But neither can it change without changing. True. When then does it change? For it cannot change either when at rest, or when in motion, or when in time? It cannot. And does this strange thing in which it is at the time of changing really exist? What thing? The moment. For the moment seems to imply a something out of which change takes place into either of two states. For the change is not from the state of rest as such, nor from the state of motion as such. But there is this curious nature which we call the moment lying between rest and motion, not being in any time, and into this and out of this what is in motion changes into rest, and what is at rest into motion. So it appears. And the one then, since it is at rest and also in motion, will change to either, for only in this way can it be in both. And in changing it changes in a moment, and when it is changing it will be in no time, and will not then be either in motion or at rest. It will not. And it will be in the same case in relation to the other changes, when it passes from being into cessation of being, or from not being into becoming, then it passes between certain states of motion and rest, and neither is not, nor becomes nor is destroyed. Very true. And on the same principle, in the passage from one to many and from many to one, the one is either one nor many, either separated nor aggregated, and in the passage from like to unlike, and from unlike to like, it is either like nor unlike, either in a state of assimilation nor of dissimilation, and in the passage from small to great and equal and back again, it will be either small nor great, nor equal, nor in a state of increase, or diminution, or equalization. True. All these, then, are the affections of the one, if the one has being. Of course. 1.a. But if one is, what will happen to the others? Is not that also to be considered? Yes. Let us show then, if one is, what will be the affections of the others than the one. Let us do so. Inasmuch as there are things other than the one, the others are not the one, for if they were they could not be other than the one. Very true. Nor are the others altogether without the one, but in a certain way they participate in the one. In what way? Because the others are other than the one inasmuch as they have parts, for if they had no parts they would be simply one. Right. And parts, as we affirm, have relation to a whole? So we say. And a whole must necessarily be one made up of many, and the parts will be parts of the one, for each of the parts is not a part of many, but of a whole. How do you mean? If anything were a part of many, being itself one of them, it will surely be a part of itself, which is impossible, and it will be a part of each one of the other parts if of all, for if not a part of someone, it will be a part of all the others but this one, and thus will not be a part of each one, and if not a part of each one it will not be a part of any one of the many, and not being a part of any one, it cannot be a part or anything else of all those things of none of which it is anything. Clearly not. Then the part is not a part of the many, nor of all, but is of a certain single form, which we call a whole, being one perfect unity framed out of all, of this the part will be a part. Certainly. If, then, the others have parts, they will participate in the whole and in the one. True. Then the others than the one must be one perfect whole, having parts. Certainly. And the same argument holds of each part, for the part must participate in the one. For if each of the parts is a part, this means, I suppose, that it is one separate from the rest and self-related, otherwise it is not each. True. But when we speak of the part participating in the one, it must clearly be other than one, for if not, it would not merely have participated, but would have been one, whereas only the itself can be one. Very true. Both the whole and the part must participate in the one, for the whole will be one whole, of which the parts will be parts, and each part will be one part of the whole which is the whole of the part. True. And will not the things which participate in the one be other than it? Of course. And the things which are other than the one will be many, for if the things which are other than the one were either one nor more than one, they would be nothing. True. But seeing that the things which participate in the one as a part, and in the one as a whole, are more than one, must not those very things which participate in the one be infinite in number? How so? Let us look at the matter thus. Is it not a fact that in partaking of the one they are not one, and do not partake of the one at the very time when they are partaking of it? Clearly. They do so then as multitudes in which the one is not present? Very true. And if we were to abstract from them in idea the very smallest fraction, must not that least fraction, if it does not partake of the one, be a multitude and not one? It must. And if we continue to look at the other side of their nature, regarded simply, and in itself, will not they, as far as we see them, be unlimited in number? Certainly. And yet, when each several part becomes a part, then the parts have a limit in relation to the whole and to each other, and the whole in relation to the parts. Just so. The result to the others than the one is that the union of themselves and the one appears to create a new element in them which gives to them limitation in relation to one another, whereas in their own nature they have no limit. That is clear. Then the others than the one, both as whole and parts, are infinite, and also partake of limit. Certainly. Then they are both like and unlike one another in themselves. How is that? Inasmuch as they are unlimited in their own nature, they are all affected in the same way. True. And inasmuch as they all partake of limit, they are all affected in the same way. Of course. But inasmuch as their state is both limited and unlimited, they are affected in opposite ways. Yes. And opposites are the most unlike of things. Certainly. Considered, then, in regard to either one of their affections, they will be like themselves and one another, considered in reference to both of them together, most opposed and most unlike. That appears to be true. Then the others are both like and unlike themselves and one another? True. And they are the same and also different from one another, and in motion and at rest, and experience every sort of opposite affection, as may be proved without difficulty of them, since they have been shown to have experienced the affections aforesaid? True. 1.bb. Suppose, now, that we leave the further discussion of these matters as evident, and consider again upon the hypothesis that the one is, whether opposite of all this is or is not equally true of the others. By all means. Then let us begin again, and ask if one is, what must be the affections of the others? Let us ask that question. Must not the one be distinct from the others, and the others from the one? Why so? Why, because there is nothing else beside them which is distinct from both of them, for the expression one and the others includes all things. Yes, all things. Then we cannot suppose that there is anything different from them in which both the one and the others might exist? There is nothing. Then the one and the others are never in the same? True. Then they are separated from each other? Yes. And we surely cannot say that what is truly one has parts. Impossible. Then the one will not be in the others as a whole, nor as part, if it be separated from the others, and has no parts? Impossible. Then there is no way in which the others can partake of the one, if they do not partake either in whole or in part? It would seem not. Then there is no way in which the others are one, or have in themselves any unity. There is not. Nor are the others many, for if they were many, each part of them would be a part of the whole. But now the others, not partaking in any way of the one, are neither one nor many, nor whole, nor part. True. Then the others either are nor contain two or three, if entirely deprived of the one? True. Then the others are either like nor unlike the one, nor is likeness and unlikeness in them, for if they were like and unlike, or had in them likeness and unlikeness, they would have two natures in them opposite to one another. That is clear. But for that which partakes of nothing to partake of two things was held by us to be impossible? Impossible. Then the others are either like nor unlike nor both, for if they were like or unlike they would partake of one of those two natures, which would be one thing, and if they were both they would partake of opposites which would be two things, and this has been shown to be impossible. True. Therefore they are either the same, nor other, nor in motion, nor at rest, nor in a state of becoming, nor of being destroyed, nor greater, nor less, nor equal, nor have they experienced anything else of the sort, for, if they are capable of experiencing any such affection, they will participate in one and two and three, and odd and even, and in these, as has been proved, they do not participate, seeing that they are altogether, and in every way devoid of the one. Very true. Therefore, if one is, the one is all things, and also nothing, both in relation to itself and to other things. Certainly. 2a. Well, and ought we not to consider next what will be the consequence if the one is not? Yes, we ought. What is the meaning of the hypothesis? If the one is not, is there any difference between this and the hypothesis? If the not one is not? There is a difference, certainly. Is there a difference only, or rather are not the two expressions, if the one is not, and if the not one is not, entirely opposed? They are entirely opposed. And suppose a person to say, if greatness is not, if smallness is not, or anything of that sort, does he not mean, whenever he uses such an expression, that what is not is other than other things? To be sure. And so when he says if one is not, he clearly means that what is not is other than all others. We know what he means, do we not? Yes, we do. When he says one, he says something which is known, and secondly something which is other than all other things. It makes no difference whether he predicate of one being or not being, for that which is said not to be is known to be something all the same, and is distinguished from other things. Certainly. Then I will begin again, and ask, if one is not, what are the consequences? In the first place, as would appear, there is a knowledge of it, or the very meaning of the words, if one is not, would not be known. True. Secondly, the others differ from it, or it could not be described as different from the others? Certainly. Difference, then, belongs to it as well as knowledge, for in speaking of the one as different from the others, we do not speak of a difference in the others, but in the one. Clearly so. Moreover, the one that is not is something and partakes of relation to that, and this, and these, and the like, and is an attribute of this, for the one, or the others than the one, could not have been spoken of, nor could any attribute or relative of the one that is not have been or been spoken of, nor could it have been said to be anything, if it did not partake of some, or of the other relations just now mentioned. True. Being, then, cannot be ascribed to the one, since it is not, but the one that is not may or rather must participate in many things, if it and nothing else is not. If, however, either the one nor the one that is not is supposed not to be, and we are speaking of something of a different nature, we can predicate nothing of it. But supposing that the one that is not and nothing else is not, then it must participate in the predicate that, and in many others. Certainly. And it will have unlikeness in relation to the others, for the others being different from the one will be of a different kind. Certainly. And are not things of a different kind also other in kind? Of course. And are not things other in kind unlike? They are unlike. And if they are unlike the one, that which they are unlike will clearly be unlike them? Clearly so. Then the one will have unlikeness in respect of which the others are unlike it? That would seem to be true. And if unlikeness to other things is attributed to it, it must have likeness to itself. How so? If the one have unlikeness to one, something else must be meant, nor will the hypothesis relate to one, but it will relate to something other than one? Quite so. But that cannot be. No. Then the one must have likeness to itself? It must. Again, it is not equal to the others, for if it were equal, then it would at once be and be like them in virtue of the equality. But if one has no being, then it can neither be nor be like? It cannot. But since it is not equal to the others, either can the others be equal to it? Certainly not. And things that are not equal are unequal? True. And they are unequal to an unequal? Of course. Then the one partakes of inequality, and in respect of this the others are unequal to it? Very true. And inequality implies greatness and smallness? Yes. Then the one, if of such a nature, has greatness and smallness? That appears to be true. And greatness and smallness always stand apart? True. Then there is always something between them? There is. And can you think of anything else which is between them other than equality? No, it is equality which lies between them. Then that which has greatness and smallness also has equality, which lies between them? That is clear. Then the one, which is not, partakes, as would appear, of greatness and smallness and equality. Clearly. Further, it must surely in a sort partake of being? How so? It must be so, for if not, then we should not speak the truth in saying that the one is not. But if we speak the truth, clearly we must say what is. Am I not right? Yes. And since we affirm that we speak truly, we must also affirm that we say what is. Certainly. Then, as would appear, the one, when it is not, is, for if it were not to be when it is not, but or to remit something of existence in relation to not being, were to relinquish something of being, so as to become not being, it would at once be. Quite true. Then the one which is not, if it is to maintain itself, must have the being of not being as the bond of not being, just as being must have as a bond the not being of not being in order to perfect its own being. For the truest assertion of the being and of the not being of not being is when being partakes of the being of being, and not of the being of not being, that is, the perfection of being. And when not being does not partake of the not being but of the being of not being, that is the perfection of not being. Most true. Since then what is partakes of not being, and what is not of being, must not the one also partake of being in order not to be? Certainly. Then the one, if it is not, clearly has being? Clearly. And has not being also, if it is not? Of course. But can anything which is in a certain state not be in that state without changing? Impossible. Then everything which is and is not in a certain state implies change. Certainly. And change is motion, we may say that? Yes, motion. And the one has been proved both to be and not to be? Yes. And therefore is and is not in the same state? Yes. Thus the one that is not has been shown to have motion also, because it changes from being to not being? That appears to be true. But surely if it is nowhere among what is, as is the fact, since it is not, it cannot change from one place to another? Impossible. Then it cannot move by changing place? No. Nor can it turn on the same spot, for it nowhere touches the same, for the same is, and that which is not cannot be reckoned among things that are? It cannot. Then the one, if it is not, cannot turn in that in which it is not? No. Neither can the one, whether it is or is not, be altered into other than itself, for if it altered and became different from itself, then we could not be still speaking of the one, but of something else? True. But if the one neither suffers alteration, nor turns round in the same place, nor changes place, can it still be capable of motion? Impossible. Now that which is unmoved must surely be at rest, and that which is at rest must stand still. Certainly. Then the one that is not stands still, and is also in motion? That seems to be true. But if it be in motion, it must necessarily undergo alteration, for anything which is moved, and so far as it is moved, is no longer in the same state, but in another? Yes. Then the one, being moved, is altered? Yes. And further, if not moved in any way, it will not be altered in any way? No. Then, in so far as the one that is not is moved, it is altered, but in so far as it is not moved, it is not altered. Right. Then the one that is not is altered and is not altered. That is clear. And must not that which is altered become other than it previously was, and lose its former state and be destroyed? But that which is not altered can neither come into being nor be destroyed? Very true. And the one that is not, being altered, becomes and is destroyed, and not being altered either becomes nor is destroyed, and so the one that is not becomes and is destroyed, and neither becomes nor is destroyed? True. 2b. And now, let us go back once more to the beginning, and see whether these or some other consequences will follow. Let us do as you say. If one is not, we ask what will happen in respect of one. That is the question. Yes. Do not the words is not signify absence of being in that to which we apply them? Just so. And when we say that a thing is not, do we mean that it is not in one way but is in another? Or do we mean absolutely that what is not has no sort or way or kind participation of being? Quite absolutely. Then, that which is not cannot be, or in any way participate in being? It cannot. And did we not mean by becoming, and being destroyed, the assumption of being and the loss of being? Nothing else. And can that which has no participation in being, either assume or lose being? Impossible. The one then, since it in no way is, cannot have or lose or assume being in any way? True. Then the one that is not, since it in no way partakes of being, either perishes nor becomes? No. Then it is not altered at all, for if it were it would become and be destroyed. True. But if it be not altered it cannot be moved? Certainly not. Nor can we say that it stands if it is nowhere, for that which stands must always be in one and the same spot? Of course. Then we must say that the one which is not never stands still and never moves? Neither. Nor is there any existing thing which can be attributed to it, for if there had been, it would partake of being? That is clear. And therefore neither smallness, nor greatness, nor equality, can be attributed to it? No. Nor yet likeness nor difference, either in relation to itself or to others? Clearly not. Well, and if nothing should be attributed to it, can other things be attributed to it? Certainly not. And therefore other things can neither be like or unlike, the same, or different in relation to it? They cannot. Nor can what is not be anything, or be this thing, or be related to or the attribute of this or that or other, or be past, present, or future. Nor can knowledge, or opinion, or perception, or expression, or name, or any other thing that is, have any concern with it? No. Then the one that is not has no condition of any kind? Such appears to be the conclusion. 2a Yet once more, if one is not, what becomes of the others? Let us determine that. Yes, let us determine that. The others must surely be, for if they, like the one, were not, we could not be now speaking of them. True. But to speak of the others implies difference. The terms other and different are synonymous? True. Other means other than other, and different, different from the different? Yes. Then, if there are to be others, there is something than which they will be other? Certainly. And what can that be? For if the one is not, they will not be other than the one. They will not. Then they will be other than each other, for the only remaining alternative is that they are other than nothing. True. And they are each other than one another, as being plural and not singular, for if one is not, they cannot be singular, but every particle of them is infinite in number, and even if a person takes that which appears to be the smallest fraction, this, which seemed one, in a moment evanesces into many, as in a dream, and from being the smallest becomes very great, in comparison with the fractions into which it is split up. Very true. And in such particles the others will be other than one another, if others are, and the one is not? Exactly. And will there not be many particles, each appearing to be one, but not being one, if one is not? True. And it would seem that number can be predicated of them if each of them appears to be one, though it is really many? It can. And there will seem to be odd and even among them, which will also have no reality, if one is not? Yes. And there will appear to be a least among them, and even this will seem large and manifold in comparison with the many small fractions which are contained in it? Certainly. And each particle will be imagined to be equal to the many and little, for it could not have appeared to pass from the greater to the less without having appeared to arrive at the middle, and thus would arise the appearance of equality. Yes. And having neither beginning, middle, nor end, each separate particle yet appears to have a limit in relation to itself and other. How so? Because, when a person conceives of any one of these as such, prior to the beginning another beginning appears, and there is another end, remaining after the end, and in the middle truer middles within but smaller, because no unity can be conceived of any of them, since the one is not. Very true. And so all being, whatever we think of, must be broken up into fractions, for a particle will have to be conceived of without unity. Certainly. And such being when seen indistinctly and at a distance, appears to be one, but when seen near and with keen intellect, every single thing appears to be infinite, since it is deprived of the one, which is not? Nothing more certain. Then each of the others must appear to be infinite, and finite, and one and many, if others than the one exist, and not the one. They must. Then will they not appear to be like and unlike? In what way? Just as in a picture things appear to be all one to a person standing at a distance, and to be in the same state and alike? True. But when you approach them, they appear to be many and different, and because of the appearance of the difference, different in kind from, and unlike themselves? True. And so must the particles appear to be like and unlike themselves and each other? Certainly. And must they not be the same and yet different from one another, and in contact with themselves, although they are separated, and having every sort of motion, and every sort of rest, and becoming and being destroyed, and in either state, and the like, all which things may be easily enumerated, if the one is not and the many are? Most true. 2.bb. Once more, let us go back to the beginning, and ask if the one is not, and the others of the one are, what will follow? Let us ask that question. In the first place, the others will not be one. Impossible. Nor will they be many, for if they were many one would be contained in them. But if no one of them is one, all of them are not, and therefore they will not be many. True. If there be no one in the others are either many nor one. They are not. Nor do they appear either as one or many. Why not? Because the others have no sort or manner or way of communion with any sort of not being, nor can anything which is not be connected with any of the others, for that which is not has no parts. True. Nor is there an opinion or any appearance of not being in connection with the others, nor is not being ever in any way attributed to the others. No. Then if one is not, there is no conception of any of the others either as one or many, for you cannot conceive the many without the one. You cannot. Then if one is not, the others either are, nor can be conceived to be either one or many? It would seem not. Nor as like or unlike? No. Nor as the same or different, nor in contact or separation, nor in any of those states which we enumerated as appearing to be. The others either are nor appear to be any of these, if one is not? True. Then may we not sum up the argument in a word and say truly, if one is not, then nothing is? Certainly. Let thus much be said, and further let us affirm what seems to be the truth, that, whether one is or is not, one and the others in relation to themselves and one another, all of them, in every way, are and are not, and appear to be and appear not to be. Most true.